Welcome to Duncan Thorin Shield's YouTube channel. I managed to con Duncan into convincing his friend to pay me thousands and thousands of dollars as a professional Counter-Strike player, so maybe he can convince you that some of his analysis is correct.
Right, this is another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is going to be Get Right, who is obviously a long time Counter-Strike player at this point in time, recently just officially retired from competitive play. Obviously he's still going to be streaming, and I'll also throw in there as well, he's actually a return guest. I think it was Reflections I did with you, like way back when you were in NiP at like the beginning of CSGO. I'm pretty sure it was that series already. I know I did one where I came to Stockholm and we did one. I can't remember if it was the other name because I used to call it like Grilled when I was at Teammates or whatever, but it was one of those interviews I know we did back then, but it's been a while, like I said, maybe 6 years or something, so we've got a lot we can cover.
I think it's actually longer. I think it's like end of 2011, if I don't remember wrong. Or maybe...
We definitely did a lot. Like that was the one we did for SK Gaming. Basically, if people don't know, actually, I mean, listen, we'll just get this out the way now. If people don't know, right, there's an infamous clip, right, where when I was at the prime of my banter in 2015, which obviously was the year NiP was going down a little bit, when obviously my style of banter especially is, it's more like old school internet, the way people used to type, it's like you flame people, of course, but I just try to do it in a funny way. That was always my logic, right? Cause on this clip, I'll say something on the desk. I think it was even just something about, what map pick it was or something. It wasn't even something that inflammatory. Because DDK was interviewing you at like a DreamHack. I think it was actually DreamHack summer 2015 off the top of my head. You made some comment where you're like, well, who cares what Thorin thinks, or, he doesn't know anything or something. And people to this day, dude, still link to that and they think we're like enemies or something. They don't realise, we've known each other a long time. There's been plenty of things nice and bad that were in between and nothing to do with that.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense in that regard, but that's how typical people are. They're like especially into the whole sensation of internet world, because basically we're grown up before that, like the beginning of it.
Sure.
We were doing a lot of columns and all the articles in general before you even did podcasts, yes, video interviews, and actually being live events. All that kind of small cool stuff. And we actually ended up meeting, I think it was around 2011, something like 2010, I think.
Yes.
So this is like 5 years later, but so it doesn't make any sense. I mean, surely people at least me, I know how you are. So it's like, every time that I hear you say something, and especially when I'm not like agreeing to it, I'm going like this, like, okay, that's just work. That's like how I look at it.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's always like some, there's always a mind to it behind everything you're saying. So it's not only just pure banter when you really ask you. And there's so many times when we've been off camera, off the whole tournament, all that kind of stuff, with long discussion about anything. Like there's a lot of interesting parts when you talk about different topics, and people are only seeing those small things. Like for example, in 2015 when I said like Thorin doesn't know anything, for example, and I think I was actually triggered at that point. I don't know. I think I heard you say something. And I think I was like one of the few ones actually saying something.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of people wouldn't have said anything, to be fair. Exactly, yeah. Like, you're just the guy who says what you think. Yeah, people don't know, by the way, as well. I've always said this to pros, especially like off camera if we're in the bar or something. I always tell people, look, in the same way, it's not really my job to flame you, but, I criticise people and I do it in my way. I totally get if a pro player, like I've even told people like fucking Zeus this, people I've criticised a lot. I've told them like, look, I totally get it if you like have a bad game and then you just pissed off and you do it to it. Like, do it, yeah. Again, as long as we all know, it's part of the game, as it were, it's no problem. It's fine. Yeah. People can let off their frustrations.
Yeah, but of course, I mean, everyone in the end of the day is a human being. Like, come on, everyone's gonna have an off day and and even be waking up on the bad side of the bed, waking up badly. It happens. Everyone is not gonna be super happy and super friendly every time. That's how life is. But people are looking way too deep into that. But I think it's just that's the difference with CSGO and other games when you think about it. Like, if you look on League of Legends, for example, like right now, G2 is basically on top of the banter thing, the top of it, and then all of a sudden LCS or LEC is also up on the LCS as well a little bit. When you look comparing through the years, they had this history with it. That's been in their DNA. But that hasn't really been in the CS one. So I think when you're starting doing it more and more, it was it took people way off. They weren't ready for it, and they were why have I done that's their reaction, So it's in the beginning it felt like the CS player were prima donnas and couldn't take a banter or at least saying something.
They definitely weren't used to it. No one was doing it, of course. Exactly. Yeah, of course not. Everyone used to just praise them of course, it's just the way fans are, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's just how the the nature became. So when everyone's super nice, super friendly, and then all of a sudden you come in and then everyone started following with that, it changes a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's like it is part of the game, like you're saying, like it is. And at the end of the day, you have to be critical of the player and the teams. That's your job. You can't be always saying they did this. Oh yeah, the game didn't go well in that way, blah 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 blah. But I know they're a great team. That like it's not gonna fill up. It's not gonna make the excitement as a viewer. And like in the end of the day, I'm a viewer and I'm a fan of the games that I'm watching. I want to hear, you know, the commentators and the talents and all that kind of stuff. I want them to say, you know, interesting stuff. Surely it's fun to hear sometimes when they're like, oh, because I'm a professional in something. I'm like, yeah, I'm not really following. I could probably give a better example.
Yes.
But it's interesting for a viewer. And I love that, you know, like me personally. And I think people should actually respect that more and more, if you ask me. Because if you know at the end of the day, and I know how you and Richard, for example, are very vocal on Twitter, for example, I know for sure that you have no problem to answer someone that's asking you, why did you say that? I'm pretty sure of that.
Right, let me ask you a question, actually, a follow-up on this, and then we'll get into all the career stuff. Actually, I have a question along those lines, because obviously it's very rare you get to talk to people, because when they retire, they can sort of be a bit more open, and they're not in the world of being a pro as much. So a question I want to ask, actually, is this. When you do criticise players, let's say, we're not talking about flame here. It's one thing if you say this shit or something, you know. I'm just saying, like a classic example for me, I always wondered about, and I've never asked publicly about this, I've only asked behind the scenes, is, let's say, for example, like the reason why that particular example always sticks out to me is because, like I say, it was also, I don't think it's a coincidence that it was also the year that, you know, your team was going down in level a little bit and you weren't winning the tournament anymore. You know, before, you either won the tournament or, you know, maybe that was a bad event, and next event you're going to win the tournament. So, you know, spirits are higher, confidence is higher. Maybe you don't worry about what people say then. But what I wanted to know is this. One of the areas that you'll always find that there's like a bit of tension between analysts on the desk and the pro players is when the analysts think basically something like that. Like they think the team isn't as good as the team think they are, but the team think for different reasons that, you know, maybe they were a great team or they've got some really good players, or maybe even sometimes it's like maybe in scrims they are killing it. Maybe they're tearing up the scrim server and they think, right, no, this tournament we're going to show you wrong. Like, what do you say about that? Because I've noticed, even though that's actually quite a mild thing, like if I say I think this team's only the fourth best, but they think they're the best, sometimes that alone can really trigger pros. So like, what do you think it is about like the mindset you have to compete? Is it something about like being an active pro? What do you think it is that bothers the pros in that sense? Because like I say, it's one thing if it's flame, but some of that, I feel like they get really, like the joke I always used to make was, if you do a listing, like this is topical actually, if you do like a ranking, like top 10 players, people will fight like it's a holy war over who's number 7 and number 8. It's not like you put the guy number 50. It's just he's number 7 and number 8. Like, people will go to war that. So what do you think about that angle? Like, why do pros have such tension, do you think?
I think we're crybabies in the end. Like,
okay.
I think there was someone, I don't remember who it was specifically saying that, but I think it was, I don't know, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. There was someone explaining like the Swedish mentality scene, that we're very friendly and very, you know, we're not gonna take the pride in someone saying you're the best player in the world. We're like, that's our nature, you know.
Right.
But when you know them and you hear them word, they're such a divas. Like we have so like, you know, it's the standard like behind the scene is such a high level.
Right.
So that's what I'm meaning. It's like we're such a crybabies in a way, because when you're touching our toes basically and making us like looking bad, you're not doing it on purpose. It's just like mentioning out for a viewer, this is happening and that, and he's been having a rough period, blah, blah, blah. And that's interesting points to hear, you know, understanding like, okay, if I haven't watched 5 tournaments in a row, I want to know how NiP is or SK or whatever team, you know, I want to see why is the Cold Sierra, you know, putting up the numbers he usually does, you know. I want to hear an explanation from you guys. And when some of the players are hearing that, you know, they're going to be, you know, triggered because they know how much they've been, you know, grinding and fighting, the practice are going well. Like the results or the pre-work before the tournament's been going super well. And then you're hearing that, you know, you're getting a little bit, you know, like, why? Like, we haven't even started yet, basically. Like, the
yes,
mindset,
that's a good point. Yeah.
So I think it's more like that in a way. But then in the end of the day, it's just like, I think it's good to be critical of a lot of things like players, and especially I think it's easier to do it against people when they're at the top of the game because they don't really care then. But when they're like falling off or not that good as they were before, you know, they're gonna be a little bit more triggered time to time. And I know for sure I was through the years. That's
understandably
true. But then at the same time, I've been very lucky because I know a lot of people know, you know, who I am outside of the game. So they're maybe not that vocal and maybe that honest. I know for sure.
Oh, that's true. Yes.
But then in the same time, I'm very thankful for that, because otherwise I would probably break even earlier. But in the same time, I think it's good for the mentality of the players to get, how do you say, like a hard shelf? I think that's the word.
Shell, or like, skin.
Yeah,
thick
exactly.
skin, maybe. Yes, yeah.
And I think that's a good way to do that for the players, in a way. Not too hard. Like, there's a middle ground in the beginning if a new player, but you should be hard to some extent, but not too hard if it's a completely new player that joined the scene this new year. Like, for example, Masuta in Vitality, last year when he's making his new debut in Vitality. If I'm going to be completely honest, I think I said that, in the podcast we did, Richard, you, me, and Assembler, I did say that, he wasn't up to the pair that maybe people were thinking. And then in the end of it, like, he popped off, like, big time. And, like, he needed just time, But I think, like, the critics, when I was looking for it, because I'm very interested to see, like, what is people's opinion. Because I want to see, his development, and I look into myself. I see the improvement. I see the big signs, like a player should do and a team should do, because they shouldn't focus too much about other opinions. And I think he did a great job, and it shows off. But I think he got a fair point of criticism. And it wasn't too bad and not too much. And I think that was a boosting point for him, because he was getting, a thicker skin. That's how I look at it. Because eventually it's going to come that day when, not specifically him, it doesn't, like, I'm just taking an example. So if he listens to this, no offense, I'm just taking an example. It's more, it could be any other player. And if they have been having that, the skin is getting thicker, that's even better. Like, it's going to be, resisting more and more with the negative comments that's going to come by it. Because we live in a world now when it's dominated by social media. Back in the days, I could read a forum post and I couldn't care less. That's, I read it and it's off. I wouldn't care.
Okay.
My mind is on a different path anyway, because I know my goal and where I want to do, Now I'm affected by, if I just pick up my phone, I will probably, get a lot of message, and after a game or whatever it is, it's going to, most of the time it doesn't affect, but there's going to be one message there that goes through, and you're going to be feeling bad about it. And that's how the world works right now. So it's a special regarding that, At least how I look at it. So.
Right, let's do it. Let's get into the career stuff. So one of the sort of themes I want for this interview, to make it different, because obviously people have interviewed you hundreds and hundreds of times, but the thing is, they haven't known you. They weren't there for all your careers. So knowing some of the things behind the scenes, I actually want to not just get into some of the things that happened, but, like where your head was at, where you were coming from. So one of the things I thought would be very interesting to fans is, like, they might not understand. Let me explain it this way, right? Basically, when we did that episode you were talking about, the one where it was like the review of 2020 for PGL, and we talked very briefly on it, obviously about, where's the Swedish scene at, where the next players, and me and you, because we're from 1.6, we sort of rapped about the fact that, there isn't the same grassroots scene, and, it also looks like players don't really, like, live and die to try and be in FNATIC and then be a pro player, It's like, to them, if you can be a pro streamer or you can play a different game, maybe they play League of Legends or something, there's a lot of distractions, basically. Basically, I would describe it like this. The reason why I've always thought people connected with you, get right, on a level that is different to even some other very good pros, is because basically, if you didn't have the skills to be get right, you would still be a player of CS, in my opinion. Like, you're one of those people where you're like a nerd, you love CS. Like, I would describe it like this way. Someone like, the famous examples would be like Forrest, Bialy. The reason these people always get criticised for playing other games is, what they love is games. Like, they just love to play games, and so they like to just have fun and play different games. You're one of those guys where, I know even from the early days, you were like all in on CS, right? It was like, it really was a dream. I know everyone always says that once they get to the top, but like you said, for years, you were really trying. We wanted to be in SK or FNATIC or whoever the best team, or NiP, NiP, whatever it was. Like, what was the early period like before we knew the name get right? Like, were you part of the scene where you would go to the LAN parties? Were you grinding on the semi-pro gathers and stuff? Like, how did you kind of like come around in that sense? Because from the moment I met you, you actually, even before you win the championship, you already had like that mentality of like, I'm all in on CS pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Actually, I think Sonic mentioned it in my news releasing, like, I'm not competing anymore. And I'm actually going to put it up here.
Where he said you were like a stand-in at some Danish LAN or something. I think
exactly.
Said,
yeah, like, I think that was my mentality. That shows up. Like, back in the days, you couldn't basically make a living on playing. Like, not at all. Like, I was lucky enough that I was, born in a way where the age wasn't matter that much, because I was still living at home, so I have I have safety in a way, and I can focus on playing a lot. And I have great parents that took care of me. And then the more longer the years went by, I understood how much my father actually cared about my career and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't understand it at the beginning, for example. But anyway, that was my pure mentality of CS, you know. Like, surely I played a lot of other games. Everyone did. Like, that's a myth that people think, you know, you have to always play one game.
Sure.
Like all the time. I think it's good to have a balance, but not in a balance where it's like you're gonna be playing, let's say, 8 hours of CS and then 8 hours of Dota, for example.
Yeah.
I don't really like that. I'm not really following suit. That's not who I am. Like, I would see surely 4 hours of Dota, it's fine, and then put 8 hours of CS, for example. Sure, why not? Do that if you want to. That's fine by me if you ask me. But when it comes to the point when it feels like you're playing more the other game than the CS that you're like professionally in, or like the game you're professionally in, then we have a little bit debate. You know, like that's the different. Like that's my opinion at the end of the day. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not. I don't know. Like that's who I am as a person. But when you go back in the days, like I was all in on CS. Yes, I were, and I played other games, but not too much. I always got bored with it. Played for a couple hours, then I was like, CS is more fun. You know, I played die-hard CS like completely to a level that was like, I didn't basically like, I wasn't a person or a live person, if you ask me. Like, I lived and breathed the game. Like,
okay,
basically when I woke up, drank water, sat on a computer for 6 hours before eating, ate a little bit, played even more, till like in the morning, went to bed, and did the same thing all over again. Like, that's what I did. And that's how I looked on how to become better and better for each day, you know, like. And surely playing is just another part, because I was also one of the first one to analyzing demos before everyone else did. I know the Danish guys were very early with that, but as a Swedish person, we're going always with this mentality of, you know, you're just better individually and you win the games with that. And we have great communication and great team play. Tactics, so it works. Like, we believed in the tactics. Like, that's also the mentality that we're very strong on. Like, you have to believe what your game leader was saying, even though if there was the worst idea you think personally, if you believed in it, it's gonna work. That's how the mentality worked. But the great strength I think I brought into a lot of people in my early years were that I analyzed a lot of demos, like POVs, demos, and all that kind of stuff. This is way before you can go to YouTube and watch the demos. So I downloaded them, watched them through, what was it, HLSW or something? I think that was the search engine for playing games and also looking for demos. But this didn't matter that you can fast forward and all that kind of stuff. So I sat for like 40
Right, you were just playing it through.
Yeah, and when I missed something, like, okay, I missed something, I wrote down the time on a single paper next to me, looked through the demo still, and wrote it down again if there's more, closed it down, restarted again, and waited through that moment.
Okay.
So I was nuts in that way. Like, that's just like, why did he do that? So, like, it is good in a way that CS 1.6 didn't count the hours, because maybe it's a bold statement of mine to say, but I think
you'd
I
have
had
the most
hours. Yeah,
yes,
I probably had
sure.
the most. Like, I know when they started, I had 120 at least per 2 weeks, 120 per least per week. Like, always, or even more. That's like, I think I even like ended up like 180 some tournaments, and that's surely pure with playing and also analyzing. But in the same time, that's just who I were. You know, like, I lived and breathed the game. Also, like, in another fact, you know, like, if you wanted to show yourself out there, it was like going to tournaments. Okay, we didn't have a tournament for a month in Sweden. When you're a nobody, what do? You go to Denmark, for example. You play their tournaments, and I did that. You know, I traveled all the way from Stockholm with a car. Had like 4 CRT monitors in the back with a friend of mine. Went when it was like snow outside. We had to sleep in a car, sleep on the floor. Like, barely had money to eat during the whole tournament. And if we were lucky enough, we could have, you know, won something on the land tournament, like, you know, their own drinks there or whatever, so you can get an extra boost of energy or whatever, you know. But that's how we were, you know. Like, I lived and breathed the game. So if we didn't win the tournament or come top 3 or something, I wouldn't come home with any money. Like, that's how we were, you know. Like, it's not like nowadays where everyone is like basically attending a tournament, they get some sort of money. Now it's like, in this time period, was like top 3 only.
Yes.
And the prize money was way different as well. So it's like, you know, it was like 85% of the prize pool money was first place as well. So if you came third, that could be like 100 euros or stuff, like 200 euros maximum. Like, think about it, if you travel from Stockholm to Denmark, taking the boat and all that kind of stuff, like, and even like pay for the bridge, Öresundsbron, I don't know the English word for it, the bridge there. From,
the toll or whatever, to go over, sure.
That cost money as well, and, you know, we didn't have hotel rooms and all that kind of stuff to, you know, do that things, you know, like, it was tough, but I lived and breathed the game. So it was fun when you like went to Denmark, because they also had a little bit extra higher price money because we're Swedish. So the, you know, the value of the money is a little bit higher.
Right. Yes.
So we had enough money to buy the boat ride back instead of going the bridge because it was cheaper. So it was like nice, relaxing time to sit in the boat to go way back for like 2-3 hours or what it was. It was like, you know, that was basically the winning for us. At least how I remember it, you know, like. And that was nothing fancy when you think about it. It was just a traditional boat trip, nothing else. But that was like our, you know, we actually did pretty well. Come second year, lost against the MTW guys back in the days, like Sonic and Wimp and etc. etc. You know, like that was like a huge achievement for the Swedish guys, you know, because we travel all the way from Sweden to Denmark and play against all the Danish teams and even German teams, you know. But like that's how where the mentality were, at least for me, and I think it was for a lot of people around that time period. Like, if you wanted to attend tournaments, you pay from your own pocket. And if you didn't have money, you either borrow from a friend, or Michael won an online tournament, sold the mouse pad you won if you even got the mouse pad. And how much is the mouse pad worth? Like 20 bucks?
Not much. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, it's not much money, you know? And sometimes you were fortunate enough to get some sponsor money for the tickets to the LAN. And that would be like, let's say like 500 euros or something like that for the whole team. That's the whole budget. Like, you're paying the tickets, but you're still representing this organization name, and you're still living on the floor, and you're still paying for everything else. You know, like it was a completely different mentality and how things were back in the days, if you ask me. And I think it was for a lot of people around the scene. Like, I think it was just a wonderful thing to be a part of it, because I think it's similar for you. You know, you came from the journalist side to do things in esports. Or gaming, because we didn't say esports in the beginning. It's like gaming. And that's a very special work to have, because like you were writing articles and you were very noticed and famous for, you know, doing such a long ones. Yes. And that time period when it was like starting to switch over to people not really, they don't want to read those long ones anymore. They wanted to read like maybe the small ones, the most important thing. Maybe this could be the letters you're writing out. That's the most important thing. But you wrote in such a big, long, detailed ones, which were amazing for me because I loved them. But for other people, they were like, you know, maybe Thorin can, you know, cut it down a little bit, you know. And I think people should be more appreciative of that in that time period, because there weren't many people around that time period like you and me and the other people, you know. Nowadays we have, what is it? Not millions, that's overreaction, but a couple of thousand different journalists that are doing great work.
Yeah, a lot of people for sure,
that things. And we have hundreds of thousands of people as professional in different, you know, games, fields, and all that kind of stuff around it. That's just beautiful to see, you know, and being a part of it and being one of those people in the beginning. I take pride to that, to be honest.
Sure. Right, one thing I want to also make as a theme, because one of the weird things is fans who only know you from CSGO, they know like the finished product, they know like the famous guy who's already dealt with that and he's had his success and was a very, very popular player. But one thing I think would really shock a lot of even your modern day fans is that was years down the line. Like, I remember when you first came along as a player, one of the real reasons, if fans don't know that, Get Right didn't just immediately get into SK Gaming or FNATIC. It was nothing to do with skill. Like, he already showed, he even beat some of these teams. The problem was there was two aspects. One kind of ties into what we're saying about like living and breathing the game and watching the demos, which is that bizarrely, even though everyone back then in reality was a nerd, as you say, even like the best player in the world gets €1,000 a month, you know, but he's still playing games all day long. Like, sadly, people back then used to have a weird mentality, which is they played the game and they would do the scrims and they would do the gathers, but they felt like anything after that was like you were try-harding, you know, and they felt, and bizarrely, they would almost make it sound like you're cheating or something, like, you just beat me because you try-harding, you know. And so I know you're one of the people who really got like slapped with that. Like, people used to be like, he's just like a no-lifer. And so, and this bled into this angle that I always thought was quite weird, which was at the time as well, a lot of the top players were like many years into their career, understandably, 3 or 4 years in. And so bizarrely, they also had some sort of thing where they tried to make it sound like you were the most antisocial person ever, you know, like, But were you back then? Obviously, you were a different person. Did you, as you say, you played CS all day? Was there a difficulty like becoming a teammate in that sense, not just in the game? Like, what did you think of this? Because I always felt like you kind of like you won people over by being a player and sticking at it and never giving up. But that could be very discouraging, I could imagine, when you're coming up and it's your dream to make it.
Yeah, I mean that was very tough. I remember, like, for example, I played a lot with a common friend of our Lurpis clan base and all that kind of stuff. And during that period, like, clan base was like basically a ladder where you were playing. For those who doesn't know what it is, and you basically played for fame, nothing else. You didn't play for money or anything. They never, at least in the end, never gave any prize pool or anything. They had their leagues similar to ESL and all other big tournaments had. But they faded out pretty early because they screwed up the whole thing. I don't know what they did. Because I don't remember. It was like, what was it? That company, Global Gaming?
GGL bought them, yeah. And then it kind of just went downhill, yeah.
Yeah. And things escalated. But that time period was like a lot of people, at least semi-professional, professional players in like the Scandinavian countries or Nordic countries, they were playing it and grinding, and some were, you know, mixing together, even Swedes, Finnish, Danish, and Norwegians, and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes you met a German player, but that was not that common because this was like a typical Nordic thing to do. And I remember in that period, because like I said, I was the grinder and like nerd, basically, what they were calling me. And I remember Lurpis and the Finnish guy were calling me Moomintrollen because, you know, the shape of the figures are like such a bright color white.
Okay.
And because my like skin color back then was like very like white, like even
right, you were very pale.
Right?
Yeah, basically,
pale,
yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they were like trying to offend me with saying that, you know, trigger me and all that kind of stuff. So they were like, oh, Moomintrollen is on again, ha ha ha, you know, like, because I was grinding all the time and I'm playing, you know. So let's say I played over for 12 hours and then it was clan based after that and I played against them or with them, you know, it was like, oh, Moomintrollen is here again, you know, or some of the names, you know. It actually got affected by me a lot in the beginning. I remember I actually felt very offended in the beginning because I just loved the game. I wanted to play and become better, and I looked up to Lurpers and those guys, Natu and
Nasu and all those guys. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Nasu, his brother, and
Ruiz, everyone.
Ruiz,
yeah,
all of them. You know, and I played / with them. You know. Like against and with them, you know, I felt very offended. Not every one of them were that. It was more the brothers. So it's not I'm not gonna take everyone in that column, but you know, I felt very offended because I looked up to them and I learned a lot during those years from them. You know, I felt very offended. But then in the end, I understood that was their, you know, their humor in a way, because when I got to know them a little bit better for years, I understood that was their humor. You know. It's the same as the Nordic people in general. We're very sarcastic when we're, you know, giving jokes and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
We can be very offensive in a way when we talk and say jokes, but it's more like the culture and how it works. It took time for me to understand because I was such a geek. But during those lines, I don't remember the second one. What were you saying?
Well, what about like obviously this then affected like actually getting into teams, because even though actually like you know in the modern day, if someone came along with the skills that you had now, like that would be the equivalent, by the way, of being like what Robs was in FPL or something. Like you can just tell the person's good. Like people now, even if you didn't have like great social skills, people will be like that'll come. You know, we'll teach them. A lot of people, like, this is basically why it didn't work out when you got the trial in SK, why it took you so long to get in a FNATIC, is people kind of used that as, like, it's almost like, I guess what we're sort of getting at here is it's almost like that was their, like, mental defense system against the fact that you were really good. Is like, they had to find some way to dismiss you, because I always thought, like, SK in particular, I know eventually you came years later and played for SK and won championships, but I always thought those players, Valet and Spawn and stuff, I'm sure now they look back and kick themselves, like, what the fuck, this guy wasn't just good, he became, like, one of the best ever, and we could have had him, and instead we basically let our rival have him and win loads of championships. So like it was kind of weird how you were held back in a way, right?
Yeah, that's true. And but in the same time, I can understand it because I remember 2008 when SK called me to play instead of Spawn for the IEM Championship in Germany.
Yes.
We came fourth that event, lost against Estro. No, Estro was called, but
the Koreans.
Later. Yeah, and Mouse, who actually won it, was so shocking for everyone that they won it. But I remember we had a 2 weeks boot camp before that, and I actually basically like last minute it felt like, even though it was 2 weeks boot camp, like put in there, you know, like get right, you're joining the team, you're playing this, blah 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 blah, and I'm like, okay, I dropped everything, I did it, you know, like I even went to school. I was like, okay, I'll do it, because they were such a, you know, older people, they don't go to school or have work. The work is basically CS, So that for them was like nothing. But for me, I was like 16 or 17. I dropped everything to do this thing for them, and I wanted to play against the best and become one of the best. But I noticed pretty early, like the second day of the boot camp or something like that, that it wasn't a great fit, if you ask me. I was too young for them. I think Robin and all those guys were like around 24, 25.
Yeah, would make sense.
And, I know that Temple was really, really nice to me during the boot camp. Me and him actually bonded pretty well. We played a lot of games, hang outside. He even, like, one of the nights we went to look on UFC.
Okay.
Small, social stuff,
Sure.
I have fond memories of how much he actually helped me out during that boot camp, personally. But me, Wale, Robin, and Alan, we weren't, that connected, But I was in that time period. But I felt it was kind of weird because me and Wale actually played together beforehand. But me and him weren't, that close. I think it was just because we were too many years difference, and also we didn't connect before as well. We were like pretty connected, but not that much. But I felt it during like second or third day of that boot camp, like this isn't the perfect fit. Like, so if this is gonna work, we need to win the tournament. I felt like that directly on that boot camp. Like, and sadly we came fourth, and I went home, and I think I still have the text message from one of the manager today, because it's a good motivation boost for me till today, even when he said, like, do you have time to call me or like talk? And I was in school because I was just back in school after Germany, and I was standing there in like one of those stairs we had.
Stairwell or something, yeah.
Yeah, and
could you sort of guess when you saw the message, like, fuck,
yeah.
He's probably just going to cut me, right?
Yeah, exactly. I understood exactly what the call was, but I remember to that day, I even asked them afterwards, like, why did it cut me? And I remember I even messaged other people, Wale and those guys, and no one replied to me at all. Like, at all, when I asked them, like, why did you cut me? And then I saw the news, and then Wale said, it wasn't a fitting, and I think it was understandable, but in the same time I felt like kind of betrayed, because I asked them personally, like, I'm fine if you ask me, I'm not gonna say anything.
Sure.
Because I'm part also in one of those older, like the older guys, or the really, like the guard, where we don't talk publicly that much.
Yes.
We're very laid back and very defensive with our stuff, but we have no problems to talk about it behind the scene, but we don't talk about it in public.
Okay.
And this was also the time period when still social media is not there yet. So remember, so we could speak about it, but wouldn't be, it would look bad on your career choice if you did that, because this is guys that everyone look up to. So
of course, yes.
If I did that, the new kid on the block talking about, Wale or Temple or any one of those guys, it would look bad, like
it's like talking about you now. Like, if a brand new Swedish player says something don't get right now, it doesn't matter if he's actually better than you now. Like, it's like if you talk shit on Spawn, Valley, like, these are the legends. Yeah, of course.
And that's true, but in the same time, I have huge respect. I wouldn't done that either. That's the thing, I wouldn't done that. I just wanted to know why. That was the thing. And to this day, I still don't have the answer, even though later on, when me and Robin, for example, were a teammate later on, a couple of years later, even though I kind of know the reason for it, but not really. But I never heard, them saying it.
Okay.
But in the same time, it was like one of those motivation boosts for me, where I was like, that was the trigger point when it became so successful later on, like a year later, when I joined FNATIC, for example, where I was like, I'm so pissed off and I want to stomp this guy. I don't care that, like, I want to win 16-3 every time. That was my goal every time when I play those guys, because I want them to suffer in a way, to make them understand, you kicked me.
Yes.
Because of this, but you didn't try to make it work. Like, you fooled yourself, and then cArn and Forrest and all those guys, they actually saw the potential of me as a player and understood, like, okay, he's younger than us, but how do we bring him into the team? That's how in my understanding and how I think, that's how I develop as a human being the most, when cArn took me under his wings and learned me about life and all that kind of stuff. And I still to this day see him as one of my older brothers, like.
Sure. Well, let me ask you a question about that, actually, because I should set up the context. Again, this is why it's actually very shocking that like as you say, it was around basically, if you remember those events in Germany were always like March, it was around that time period when they'd had CBIT, obviously. So it was only literally like 9 months later at the end of the year that announcement came where it was like, right, FNATIC is recruiting Get Right and Gox, and they're coming in, and these were both players who were in a similar position, both like skilled players, played for, even funny enough, played for some of the same teams at different points in time, like played in the second, you know, like the 4th and 5th and 6th best Swedish teams. You went to the lands, obviously the talent was there, but the problem was both of the top teams at the time, FNATIC and SK, both were full of these veterans and who'd all had a lot of success in the last few years. So they all actually had the same logic of like, you not only have to be good, you almost have to like fit in with us, even though you can't be us because you haven't been playing for years and you won't have the same mentality. So I know, for example, the reason it was very shocking that FNATIC picked you up and then that it worked was FNATIC was actually even worse than SK. SK and still in theory at the time like to stack star players, right? Yeah. FNATIC was the team that they even used to say in interviews, like it's also about like the social vibe, you know, like obviously people know like a lot of those players are like lifelong friends, you know, cArn and DSN and Forrest and stuff were all very close back then. Like these are the guys where, because they spent so much time together, they also wanted it to be where it's like, you can be good, but you have to fit in with us. So a lot of people I remember said, oh, this move will fail. I even remember thinking myself, like, is this like desperation on their part? Like they've abandoned their philosophy and they're just going to go like basically the SK route. And so the fact that they brought you in was a big deal, right? I mean, as you say, like, it's interesting. They actually actively tried to sort of help you fit in that way.
Yeah, I mean, they did. And like I said before, you know, I'm forever grateful for how open and they took me under their wings, all of them, even Harley, DSN, and Forrest as well that early. And one of the things that actually were the most shocking to me when I actually got the offer from cArn, where they asked me first instead of Gox, because in my opinion during that time period, Gox were better than me in skill and also on the social levels, like in general. So I was actually very shocked they asked me before, and we actually got maybe a month later because we replaced him with Archie because we had issue with him because they were the thing where they were only replacing ins with me. Yes. And this is, if I don't remember wrong, also there was one thing that was very weird for me where they asked me who's gonna be the 5th player, and it was between ins and Archie. And they asked me as a new recruit who's gonna stay. You got a vote. I see. Yeah. Okay. And I remember I voted for Archie. And then 1 month later, we kicked them and brought in Gox instead. But I remember that. So when I joined the team after like maybe the 1st or 2nd day, they were directly, okay, well, just so you know, we don't have a 5th. And I'm like, what? I thought I was only replacing ins. No, we're deciding between ins and Archie. I'm like, oh, okay. Who do you want to play with? Because we have our own votes. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, that's too much pressure of a guy that just joined the team. Like, how can I do that? You know, how can I get a responsibility that early, especially in the newer team, to do such a thing, you know, like, but still, like, when I think about it, like, it was a little bit weird that SK did like where they did against me in a way, but understandable. But very interesting that actually FNATIC went away from their mindset and thinking how a team works, like go against the philosophy of being, you know, friends outside of the game, doing a lot of cool stuff outside the game. And this was very rare for during that time period because no one did anything else than just playing with each other. But FNATIC were one of the guys, you know, going out all the time, being with other teams like the Danish guys and the Polish guys, and being very socially open and being great in interviews during that time period. You know, like, they were way up above in a lot of ways than the other teams. You know, other teams were basically there just grinding and playing and be the best, basically, which is also good. But when you look on esport and gaming in general, that direction was changing that time period where, like, you know, you have to focus on a lot of more stuff than just being the best. And social media and all that kind of things were starting to blow up more and more. So I'm very, very thankful for those guys as well to take in the chance, and especially Forrest, like, the partner in crime for all these years, you know. Forever grateful for that, you know.
Right, one of the reasons why this is obviously such a great storyline is, like we say, after the disappointment of 2008, you almost couldn't write like a better like movie next chapter of how 2009 went, because if people don't know, in the second event you played for the team, you won the fucking major. That was when you won the exact same tournament the next year that you'd had the trial for SK for. And then after that, if people don't remember, that's when that team just took off and you were like basically unbeatable. I know, unfortunately for some of the players in that team, everyone has like a negative memory because they still remember the World Cyber Games later in the year. But like that year was an amazing year. Like as you're saying, if you were looking for revenge, and especially if you want to beat teams like SK and have a chance to fulfill your dreams, it must have been incredible.
I mean, it were, but like you're saying already, like in general, the year was awesome. Like we won a lot of things. We went through a lot of problems as well, like outside the game, inside the game, and we were the best team that year. But we couldn't finish up winning that World Champion or World Cyber Games finals. Still haunts me to this day. God damn it, Philip and Victor and all those guys. Like, God damn it, why couldn't you just give it to us? But I don't know. It was a very like sweet year in general, like for my personal career, because you have to also remember like it took me a long time to be a professional gamer. I think it took me around like 5 years before I actually made it. 5 years, there's not a lot of people would actually take
no way.
Like at least nowadays they will just give a year maximum. Like it took me 5 years. So me living and breathing a game, that's an obsession in another level that maybe a lot of people don't have.
One of the things I actually always wanted to ask you about on camera is people will know that I've alluded in many of my videos, because it's a side to Forrest that a lot of people don't know. Like I said earlier about him being a gamer, it's not that he's like lazy and he just doesn't practice the game. It's just that like if people knew the periods of time, there'll sometimes be a 2 or 3 month period where maybe he doesn't play the game much. Maybe he just plays the scrims, he plays the officials. By the way, a fan might not even know. Maybe in that period he even does well in the game. Like they think, oh, he must be in peak form or whatever. But he's clearly someone where he wasn't like you in the same sense of like you live and breathe CS only and you've got the crazy mentality. He's more of someone where it actually goes with his personality. He's kind of like an easygoing guy, you know. He just, if something's this way, it's one day, it's another, whatever. It changes fine. Like, what was it like to actually play with someone like that? Because obviously the skill's incredible, but it does mean that there's times where, I don't know how much you know about basketball, but basically there's a very famous duo, which was when Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant played together, right? And one of the things that made their dynamic very interesting is, even though they personally did have issues like on a personal level, which you guys didn't in terms of you and Forrest, what made their dynamic in a weird way work is that Shaquille O'Neal was more like the Forrest side. It's like when he's motivated, he plays, he's the best. When he isn't, he's still pretty good. He just, he has a time where he chills a little bit, whereas Kobe was more like, he was the guy like you, just killed himself all the time, like every day he's trying to get the best out of himself. And in a weird way, that combo actually complements each other very well, because it means that the guy who's like the superstar player who chills out a little bit, he can still win and still be in a very good team when he's chilled, but the other guy also still has a partner in crime, as you're saying, when they're both in form. So I can see how that can work, but obviously it's about like, you've got to strike the right relationship there. You've got to like kind of understand where and what each person's doing. So I always thought it made a lot of sense that once you got together, you just stuck together. So like, what would you say? How would you describe Forrest the teammate in that sense? And like, what would your explanation be?
Ooh. In my head, very lazy person, at least in the beginning. That's the honest answer. I was like, there were so many times when I'm like basically begging him to play more. Because I know how much, I'm not begging, that's maybe too big words, but like, forcing him to play more at least, like, because I know how fucking good he were. And everyone know that in the team and the players who met them as well. Like, he's such a goddamn good player. And I'm also very jealous of him because he didn't need to put in the time that I needed to, at least according to myself. Because I know, for example, if I put in the time and effort to something, I'll become very good at it. But if I do it very sloppy and play a little bit there and that's it, I'm not going to perform to the level that I want to every time. But Forrest, where, like, he could be, screaming for a month, and that's about it. And then be fucking amazing. I'm jealous in that way, like, I couldn't do that. Or I can't do that either, But I also think that he complimented me so much because I was a little bit jealous of him the whole time. Because of like how much less he could play than me. Because I also want to do other things, but I felt like the need and the necessary for playing more because, If I don't, I'm not gonna perform. But one thing that I admire him, that he was pushing me as well, because I wanted to be better than him every time.
Sure.
So he could come in, play a little bit, and that's about it. It felt, I mean, a little bit. Of course, he's putting in the hours. It's not like, you know, he's playing 2 hours every day or less, you know. No. He played a lot, but to my standard, it was like nothing, you know, because I played too much.
Yes.
But he triggered me to become even better player, because I felt like if I want to compete and be his teammate and perform that we win, I need to be better than him. So when I have a bad game, he's gonna outshine everyone anyway. And during that time period, you know, it was me, him, and then we also had huge help from Gux, for example. So we're not gonna just, you know, talk about us two, because Gux were also a big, huge factor where we were that good, because he was also fucking talented and really good. But he was a mixer of both, you know, playing a lot, sometimes not playing a lot. You know, he was a mixer of both. So he was like the split between us two in a way. But if you compare me and Forrest, only was, you know, him playing less than me and I'm playing like way up here, you know, like. But I think like we just understood, you know, the game and like how we wanted to play it, and complemented each other much better than we think we were supposed to. Because we have such a different play style, such a different mentality time to time. You know, like I live and breathe the game. He lived and breathed the game in his way. You know, it's just a huge different mentality, I think. Because I know end of the day, he gets pissed when he loses a game.
Yes.
He doesn't show it off that openly, and he doesn't show it like that people may see it as I do, but he gets pissed. He does get pissed. So I know how much the game means for him, and how much, you know, the team means for him, and winning and all that kind of stuff. So, I will never ever in my whole world really talk badly about him, because he's also one of the guys that took a gamble for me during my whole career, you know, and he's still to this day. So I'm forever thankful for what he did and done for me. But he believed in me that later people didn't do, and I'm forever thankful for that, because he's the best teammate you can ever have, if you ask me.
One thing that I thought would be interesting to ask about is, you alluded to it there. I actually used to worry, mate, that you did play the game too much in 1.6, because especially this is the era when, like, if people don't know, these stories are real. Like, I've seen you literally lose a final. It's like a really close one, or even there's even some insane rare occasions where you won, but you just didn't do that well yourself, and you would be like, right, I've got to get back to, like, I've got to do my DM tomorrow, and I've got to get back playing again, like, I've got to improve. Now the problem with that is, like, I always say, whenever you hear these stories, because there's like certain very famous athletes who also had like an amazing work ethic, what I always say is this: if they win, I have to just say, right, maybe they just know something I don't, and, you know, fair enough, it worked. But I did used to worry a little bit, like, because normally, like we're saying here, pros will play and then everyone's at like a similar level. There's a few people who play a little bit more, but you were basically almost doing as much as you could do. So what was the mental, like, I guess it ties into what you were saying, right? Another thing that you just alluded to there is a lot of pros would be very scared, even privately, to say, like, I'm going to be the best player or something, especially if they play with a player like Forrest. But you actually, that was also kind of part of your mindset, right? It's like, I'm just going to, I mean, if I'm going to be the best I could be, then I have to try and be the best of anyone, right?
Yeah. I mean, looking back to it, you know, I have fond memories, I would say. I think it was nice memories, to me at least, where, you know, if we lost the final, I put in even more hours. You know, I'll directly go home as soon as possible if I can and play even more, you know, like, and even push myself in longer. But also did a good thing and an amazing thing, if you ask me, where if we won a final and me or Forrest or anyone else were the best player in the tournament, it didn't matter for me. I will come back and do the same thing again. You know, I even put in more hours and push the boundaries even more, you know. So I have only fond memories regarding that. But then at the same time, like, I would never scream out loud and say, you know, I'm the best player or anything like that, because I have the own battle, and that's me putting the pressure of me being the best player according to me. I will never brag about it or say it to someone else face to say I'm the best player in the world, because I see that as being rude, and I see that as being, you know, cocky in a way. I am cocky in some ways, but not cocky in that extent where I'm gonna be saying that out loudly and, you know, crash the next tournament, crash the 2 tournaments in a row. You know, like, for me, I'm gonna show it off with playing, and that's just my mentality in the end of the day. You know, like, And that's how I looked through the years in 1.6 especially. And CSGO in the beginning, like that's where I went with, Surely later on, I don't really have the energy, like you're saying. When you're pushing yourself in the boundaries, eventually that's going to stop because it's going to take toll on you, like with your health, personal life, or mentality, or your psychological health as well, like everything, like eventually it's going to take a toll on you, So I should probably have in the early stage. Nowadays it's more normal to have it, like mental coach. That would have helped me so much for my career. Like at least having, someone that Jens, at least he was the one that helped me a lot in NiP later on in the career, where he helped me on my mental stage a lot and physical health as well. If I would have him earlier, I think I would have probably have a better and longer career in a way that I would be, very happy with my performance in the end. Like I'm disappointed in the end with my performance. I am. That's the honest truth.
Along those lines, another thing, and I've noticed this really is like a quality that, in my opinion, every champion who won a lot of trophies had, because I think maybe you have to have it, you can tell me, right? There's a lot of people in CS and life in general, right? If they have a dream or they want to accomplish something, they kind of do think of it as like, right, that's like a place I'm going to get to, and then once I'm there, it's fine. So there's a lot of people where if they win one major in their career, that's awesome. They'll have an amazing week, they'll celebrate it. If they just come top 4 at the next major, or they have a final, like, listen, they might not like it in the moment, but they're not going to kill themselves practicing. They essentially, some success sort of, it's like it quenches their thirst. One of the things I noticed about you was, even in this time period we're talking about, where you're winning the major and you're on some of the most dominant teams, even the SK team later was like one of the most dominant teams at the time, had amazing win rate. You really had that mentality. It's not an exaggeration. Like, you wanted to win every trophy, right? Yeah. Every tournament.
Yeah. Like every tournament, every trophy was mine. That was my mentality. Like always. Doesn't really matter, in the end of the day, because like I look on my career as a professional athlete, like a normal traditional athlete. We're not gonna have too many years to do with it, so I want to get the best out of it. So if I want to be successful in that regard, I need to give everything for it for as long as I can, or X amount of time, so like I would probably do the same thing every time, like there's not an answer to it. So I always looked at it like that. And surely you need breaks, you need all those things. I learned it during the years, you need actually breaks more than people think, because I wouldn't recommend to do the same path as I did, because it's not normal. You're stupid. And I was one of the stupid ones, so I'm calling myself stupid, not anyone else. But you need to have that if you want to have the mentality of winning. I think, like, one of the few people I see through the years that I've seen it to the same mentality I had, I think it's AW, if I'm going to be honest.
Sure.
Because I talked to him in the beginning before he, like, joined FNATIC and all the things that happened afterwards and they winning and all that kind of stuff. He was one of them, and I think Flushes also. And I was never close to Flushes. I don't know him or know him that well, but I knew a little bit JW in the beginning. Didn't know him, and then became better friends later on in the years, But I noticed that, in his early career, where he had the same mentality like I did, like if he wants to be a champion, he needs to be a champion, and needs to put in more hours and time than everyone else. And I think that's a great quality that some people have, and those people are gonna be successful. And in the end of the day, it's not just about the game that I'm playing or sports or anything. That's about anything, if you ask me. If you need to be, or if your goal is to be very successful in anything, you need to give everything for it. It's simple as that. And I think people understand that because there's such many YouTube videos and words from other people that's very successful in anything they are. But I don't think people really understand it when they're like saying it out loudly, because
yes.
you need to be on that grind. I think like anything you want to be successful in, sports, esports, gaming, streaming, journalism, be good on what is it called? Like the stock market, or
investing, sure.
Like successful company, like being a great doctor, or whatever it is, whatever you want to be, you need to push the boundaries even more than, the person next to you to be even better and all that kind of stuff. Surely it sticks out more if you're successful in sports and show yourself out there in that regard, and, for example, be a chef. But a chef can learn a lot of stuff and similar to whatever everyone else is. But at the end of the day, if you want to be a person that's going to be better than the one that you were teaching, like become a chef with, you need to put even more time than that person did, and show yourself off to be better and make the food faster, or the ingredients, or change it up, the food you're doing, or whatever it is, they probably know more than me. I'm not a professional at it.
Sure.
I don't know that much about the chef thing, or like a chef, but that's just an example of mine. Probably poorly said, but yeah, that's how at least I look on it. If you want to be successful in anything, you need to be ready to sacrifice more than other people are doing.
Like, one thing I thought would be interesting is, because you were in these different teams, where some people, played 4 or 5 years in one team, you got to play with a lot of the different in-game leaders in the Swedish scene, actually. So one that I actually want to ask about, just because no one ever talks about this period, is you obviously played under Threat way back when you were both on the come up, and people now, obviously, especially in the modern day, will know Threat, and they'll know he's got a great mind for the game, and you later was your coach, right? When you played under him, like, what was Threat like as an in-game leader? Because I know from talking to him, he also, I guess he has a connection to you in that sense, like in the same way as a lot of the Swedish players. Like, basically the way teams like FNATIC and NiP played in CSGO, that was just the way all the Swedish teams play. You play semi, like, it's a little bit loose, you have a standard set of stuff you're going to do, and the idea is then it's on the players. It's up to the player to make the right decision, to do the right thing, whereas he wanted to be almost like, I always joked with him, he was like a secret Dane. Like, he almost wanted to play like the Danish style of Counter-Strike, where you have the set tactics and you hit this timing and this guy does this. Like, what was it like to play under him?
Of all in-games leaders I played under, Fret was the one that taught me the most, because he was there in the beginning of my career, and also in a way in the end of my career as well. Like,
sure.
He taught me the most about the game and understanding and how it changes the meta, and like how to be more aggressive, more passive, more laid back, and all that kind of stuff. So he taught me the way of like understanding the game way better than anyone else did. Like, maybe he didn't see it as that, but I see it as how he taught me, like, because in the beginning, we had, lesser Danish style tactics in our earlier stage of our career, but then he changed it up with me more, tactically heavily, and more team play, more communication, and like more thinking outside of the box thinking. He did that and made me as a better player and a better teammate through the years, because how his mentality were of leading a team. If I would describe him as like an in-game leader, very tactical one, someone that loves to do things outside of the box a lot. He comes up with things that doesn't make any sense in the first time we see it, because you're gonna be like, why are we doing this? Or can you give me an explanation of why this is gonna work, or anything like that? And when you try it out, you're going to be in the beginning like, nah, it's not going to work. But then you try it a couple of more times, you're going to see the mindset and like how we went through it, and like how we did it, and understand it, and like why it's going to work, and all that kind of stuff. And it blows my mind every time when he did that. Like, I remember fondly in 2016 when he became my coach the first time. I think it was the first time we did. I think it was 2 times, because he took a break afterwards. And he showed me of changing my role like completely, and do a 180, and like use me in a way that's gonna benefit the team more. It's gonna hurt my stats and my individual playing, but he told me to change it completely, and explaining me like how my teammates gonna help me, but also give me the room to do whatever I want to. And before I had the space of doing whatever I wanted to, because he trusted me, and he knew I'm not gonna do any stupid mistake, and if I did, I'm gonna repay it the next round or two rounds later. Like, I'm that kind of a player. Like, I'm gonna redeem myself more and more and help the team even more if that's necessary. But he he taught me the way of being more aggressive and more, you know, understanding of the game. Like, why am I sacrificing myself to the teammates, and understanding like how it works, like how the game it's supposed to be played, you know, like, because at the end of the day, you're 5 people and you're gonna work together as a group, not individuals, and you're just gonna be winning by that. Because that was semi in my way, or how I think of it. That's how the Swedish CS were about, you know, like,
Yes.
5 people together, best player together, have a decent or a good in-game leader that has the voice that everyone listens to and trusts the gut with it. Here was a guy showing off because he is not a vocal.
No, he's a pretty quiet guy. He's kind of like a chill guy, if people don't know. He's not an authority figure like that, yeah.
No. Like, Fred is not a person. He will explain it to you. And if you don't explain, he's going to explain it again. He's going to be that person. But he's not going to get mad if you don't understand it, or being like give up too easily. He's going to be like giving you breathing room to actually understand it, what he means with it, and show you proof of how it works. And he's also going to be like, you know, very laid back and say, it's okay, go forward instead of backward. Like, let's say we lost anti-eco, for example. A lot of coaches, like, namely, would be mad because someone did something that would be more aggressive or hunting for eco kills or whatever it is, you know. Fred would be like, it's okay, look forward instead, you know, like. But he didn't say it in a way that's gonna be everyone listens to it to the bone. He's gonna say it like normally, and it's gonna be very, very laid back in that way. And I think that's a very good quality of his, because, you know, in the end of the day, if he did a mistake, you have to understand it, not him, because he's gonna mention it once or twice, but it's not gonna make you be like mad about it. He's just gonna make you understand the issue that he did and go forward and let it, you know, disappear. That's how I look at him as a in-game leader, because some in-game leaders could be very pissed and be like, why did you do that? You know, like, and then like have the angry tone and motivation to push yourself forward and do the correct way later on. Or you do the same mistake again, but a little bit better. So you take 2 guys with you or 1 guy with you and then hope for the best, basically. He was, you know, like thinking it forward instead of being like, there's no need to yell him out because he did this mistake. It's better to be like making him understand it and see it from his own eyes, to see, okay, you did this because you were way more aggressive and like way more laid back. That's how I would describe him as a game leader or coach.
The other one I wanted to ask about is cArn, because I have to say, right, one of the reasons I can relate to you as well is I was a nerd in the same ways. And if people don't know, like, I wasn't a charismatic person back then. As you say, I wasn't even on camera most of the time. So one of the areas I actually used to have a way more limited understanding of the game is I really did just only used to look at what they did in the server. And because I myself wasn't a super social person, it's not even that I didn't consider, it's just that the world didn't exist to me, you know. No. It was like, however good you are in the server, this is what, you know, this player should be able to play with this player. I didn't realize things that, you know, if they don't get along personally or they can't communicate, it's not going to work. So I'll fully admit, I've even said it to him, one of the players I did underrate was cArn, because I used to look at his tactics and be like, these are pretty simple, and you've got Forest, and then later you've got Get Right and Gux. Like, that's why I used to troll him and be like, you know, anyone could just say, you know, Forest, Gux and Get Right, just run over the bomb site. Like, I used to joke, be like, those aren't tactics, mate. But I have to say, from getting to know him as a person and developing myself, I really underestimated some of the social components that he had as like a captain. And he is a very charismatic person. If you ever talk to him in person, like, he'll win you over. He can put an idea in your mind or convince you in a way that's like, it doesn't have to be the most convincing argument. It's the way he'll sort of talk. So what was it like to play under cArn? What were his strengths as a leader?
Smooth talker. 100%. No, like, he's a smooth talker. Like, he has the voice of everyone listening to, you know, but he also has a good thing where he's like, you know, he's also open to ideas, so always listen to everyone else, you know. But he also believed in very straightforward, very simple things instead of very tactical things. Surely sometimes that comes up because he's also a great, he had a great mind for the game and great understanding of tactics and how it should be played according to him. But he was a guy that, you know, you trust him, you know, like if cArn said something and then let's say DSN said something or Forrest said like, no, they're weaker here, they do this, blah, 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 blah. He would be like, you know, looking at you and then like, okay, let's do like this. And he changed completely the game plan in a second, you know, like, and sometimes we actually didn't have it pre-planned or anything. Like he was very good on, you know, doing on the like standby in the last second, like change the complete tactic, because he trusted his players around him, and he knew, like, you know, surely he had me, Gux, Forrest, and DSN as well. He was still great in his career there as well with us, and himself, you know, he was such a great clutcher as well. He won so many clutches that was like amazing to me. You know, I learned a lot from him as well, to be a clutcher myself. But he was always open to people, always. Like, he never shut down the door. If he did really shut down the door, he believed in it, and then everyone would agree, you know, and always trust them. But he was always open to be like, okay, they're weaker on the B side, let's go here. Okay, Chris, do this, and I would trust them, you know. And people would agree with him and trust him in that way, you know. Like, I think he was a natural leader, if you ask me. Someone like, how can I reference, or like say a similarity to? I can't even come up with anyone because I don't watch that many sports anymore. But he's just a typical leader where he can even make a joke during calling, and people will be like laughing, have a good time, and like feel good with themselves. And then, you know, oh, it worked. Well, not like being shocking in a way worked, but more like, you know, trusting him and knowing it's gonna work because, you know, he was confident in it, even though he made a joke in the same time with it, you know, like, because people would understand, like, that's how his mentality were, you know, like, we're gonna win because we have the firepower with it.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be the best tactic in the world or the best mindset to it or anything. You just gotta believe with it. That's how I look at him as a game leader.
Right, this might sound like I'm taking a tangent and going a different direction, but it's going to come back. This is still the same topic, but I'm going to take, I'm going to set it up basically. Yeah. One of the things, before you came back to SK Gaming, when you came and you played under Robban, so we're going to talk about that in a second, you'll see why I'm setting it up this way. Yep. Basically, one thing that is really hard to explain to fans, especially who only maybe saw you at the height of your 1.6 career, is at the end of 1.6, it's true, you did already have this lurker style. In my opinion, you were already the best player. Like, you'd mastered the style to some degree, and then you took it into CSGO, and obviously you were amazing in CSGO early on. But one of the interesting things is that wasn't your playing style in the early days. It wasn't even when you first joined FNATIC. Like, the funny thing is, the joke I said before of like kind of the 3 stars of FNATIC just run in the bomb site and shoot everyone, that was the style. So it wasn't the get right people are going to know. So what was the early get right style like? What was your like natural style when you just came into the game and became a pro and got in the first teams?
My early career's play style would probably be, I wouldn't say an entry fragger, but I would say like the secondary fragger, like they come into the bomb site. Sometimes we're also the entry fragger, because like I said before, like I learned play style and I watched a lot of demos. I know how people were reacting to different situations, and they were trusting me with that. Like, especially in the FNATIC times where I was saying, okay, let's do like this because this is gonna work, because I know he's gonna be standing here and it's gonna be a time window here, because this guy's gonna rotate here or be here, or if he's gonna already be there, it's because there's no sound here, or someone did that, you know. So my early years career were semi-entry frag, I guess, but also very like knowledgeable about the game. So I could also be ending up in a clutch situation if it was necessary, because I had such a high knowledge about the players in the game. So I would probably describe myself as more like that. So sometimes I could be lurking in a way, but I wasn't die-hard lurking, like I did later on in my career. And I can only say it's thanks to Robban that I became the lurker.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's what I want to transition into, mate, because again, like, listen, you took the style and you mastered it, but I mean, he's the guy who came up with the idea. You once told me this story. It was when you joined SK, that when you joined SK after being in FNATIC, you'd had all this success, you'd been one of the best players in the world, maybe you even were the best Swedish player. He said something to you. It wasn't the gist of it, something like, I'm literally going to make you like the hard lurker and everyone's going to fucking hate you. You're going to be the bastard. And wasn't it something like that? Like something crazy. And so, like, what did you even think of this idea when he told you? And like, how, because obviously it became your style. Like you embraced it. So what was it like?
I think it was first or second day of practice with the team. And he has said, like, Chris, like straight up, like you basically said, you know, like, you're gonna change your playstyle to be super hard lurker. You're not gonna be thinking about anything else. You're not gonna be thinking about us, and you're gonna be the motherfucking guy that everyone hates. That's something during those lines. I don't remember it correctly. I think Robin, if he remembers, he could probably tweet it out later on. But that I've said it for years as well, and that's how I remember it at least. And I used to remember where I was like, I didn't agree with him in the beginning, not like completely, but I agreed to him to some extent because I understood his thought process with it. You know, like because I was later on in FNATIC, I became a little bit more lurker in a way. I was still entering when it was necessary to it, but not to hard extents.
Sure.
Because we swapped up Gux between it.
Yes.
Brett came in and the Gux came back, and you know, like all that kind of stuff. So, and I think I remember why I remember it more is because I remember we played Nuke, and we were CT against some teams in practice. And we rushed lobby, and that's not a pretty normal thing in 1.6. You rush lobby as CT. I mean, you did for ramp, but not from hut and door and all that kind of
course
stuff.
Not.
And the funny thing, I think FaZe actually team killed 2 guys at the same time when Robin said that. So that's why I'm remembering it so more, because it became like a hilarious moment. Because like he was like explaining it to me, because we just had a fun practice, chill, relax practice, and then all of a sudden FaZe just randomly throw a nade in lobby and kill me and someone else when we attacked lobby and lost the round, and everyone was sitting laughing there. And then I was like, because I couldn't take that serious what Robin was saying. But I mean, I took it serious, but not to the extent like completely. Till afterwards when we actually discussed it more and more, you know. But that's where it basically started, like this whole lurking style and taking it to a perfection, or you know, to a longer extent than I did before, you know. And that became the norm, you know, that I was lurking always last. I was always trying to win the clutches and all that kind of stuff. And I'll be like, Robin were basically the guy that, you know, started this whole thing with me becoming a lurker and hardcore lurker, you know, because he told me those simple lines, you know. I'm gonna be the most hated person that everyone hates because he always gonna be last. That was his mindset's mentality, or you know, thought process with it.
Right, obviously, since in the modern day, you don't really have players who play like that anymore. In fact, a lot of the people who had the famous style, like you, Happy, Hiko, even you guys, you know, eventually it wasn't as successful for you, and you guys changed your style of play or went to different teams or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, in the modern day, people are going to think, like, oh, that style just doesn't work. But they won't realise, like, I mean, just think of those 3 players I named there. Like, at their peaks, they were amazing when they did that style. I mean, you were arguably the best player in the world in both 1.6 and CSGO. So if we look, you got like a solid, I'd say like a solid at least like 4 years, 5 years where you were able to make the style work. You were winning tournaments, you were one of the best players. And then, yeah, later you had Threat come in and you changed up the style. And, you know, as times change, you have to change, of course. Right? The reason why I think this is worth pointing out is that's also, to a fan who's already played matchmaking, they might think, well, yeah, of course, if you bait everyone, you know, you get all the kills. But I don't think they understand. In a pro match, that is one of the hardest styles to be successful from. Because if you are always the last one, well, you know, in theory, someone could, like, process of elimination, figure out where you are on the map, or they might know that you're coming into a 1v3, a 1v2. People remember those famous stats where you were, like, winning most of the 1v2s. Like, you're not supposed to win those situations. Like, so, like, this style, you must have had to put a lot of work in to make it so good, right? It doesn't just work like, you don't just do that and just chill out and win every game doing that style. It's pretty hard, right?
It is very hard because I still had to, you know, take in my experience and what I thought was the correct way to play CSGO or CS in general, where, you know, analyzing even more demos and understanding more about the game and all that kind of stuff. And lucky during that time period when they started streaming were becoming a thing on YouTube, you know, so you can watch it a little bit better than I did before. So it was a lot more like when you changed to the play style of that, you had to play a lot of pugs mixes and really define it even more and force yourself into the corner every time and like put on the weight on your shoulder, like, okay, how does it feel to be the person everyone like trust and everyone like really take into the bone that he's gonna win it 9 out of 10 times. It is a very tough and a hard thing to do. surely, like you're saying, it could look very easily because those people get so many kills, blah 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 blah. But like, it is a lot of mentality to it. Like, you need to be very strong, because if you have a weak mindset, it's not gonna work out, because you have such a heavy weight on your shoulders every time. Because when Morris is not winning that entry, or those 2-3 kills that he can do, which he did a lot of times, it's not like he never did it, but or Alan or Robban or Delpan or FaZe, for example, not doing their job that they're also meant to do, the heavy weighting comes to my shoulders. I'm taking not their mistake, but not them not hitting the shot at the time, like perfect time. It comes to me, and it decides the factor of the game on me, and that's not everyone can do, if you ask me. Like, it's a very tough burden and a very tough weight to have on your shoulder every time. But I have such a strong mentality in those days, and like, I had such a strong beliefs in my theory and how to play the game, and how to do it correctly, and understanding how the game changes and all that stuff. So it worked out good in that way, because we were very strong teams and we were very successful, and it helps a lot to have a player like Forrest next to you to do wonders with what he does.
Sure.
So it wasn't that heavy, like I maybe explain it, but it was heavy a lot of times when, let's say, you're playing ESWC finals against Navi, you're under 3-12 on the first map in the grand finals, and you're making a comeback in second half as T, and you're put in a 1v3 situation. I think Forrest even team killed himself with a nade, and I was on A-bomb site, and everyone was swarming me for every side and every angle because they knew exactly where we were. And I had to decide the fate of this game, if we're gonna lose this map, and maybe we can drag it to a third map, but this is already be a tough game mentally for us because we're under 3-12 first half. How can I make it to that we're gonna win it? Of course, clutching the run. And I did. But the funny thing is that people don't know from that time period is actually this was like a 15-13 round. So we took it to overtime eventually. So I clutched the round. And in the last round, I didn't have any sound because I accidentally put out my in-ears. And this is a time period where you can't pause, and like technical and all the kind of stuff we can do in CSGO, you have to just play with it. So I didn't have a sound. I couldn't hear anyone or anything, like even TeamSpeak, because that's where, and Triller we used that back then. So in the last round, I think this on YouTube, I'm just basically running around and writing and saying like, I'm going there, and then screaming at top of my lungs, hope that everyone can hear what I'm saying, because we're still having the helicopter headsets on us and underneath it on ears. And then we managed to win it to overtime, or take it to overtime, and then win the overtime and win the final eventually with crushing them on Dust 2, for example.
Yes.
Like I said, and trying to say, it's like it's not that easy as people may think, because you're just getting the kills and all that kind of stuff. Because surely you're boosting yourself to have a lot of nice kills stat wise, but it's a bigger object in the end, and a mission, because this is for the team itself to win the game, and not everyone can do that, if you ask me.
Right, one thing that might confuse people, so I wanted to get your thoughts on this, is when we contrast you and Forrest in that way, just because of the way it's satisfying as a story, it obviously sounds crazier if it's really extreme, as we say, if he'd never played and then you played all the time, which isn't true. There's definitely more of a blur than that. But similarly with skill, I feel like people want it to be too much like a movie. If this was a movie, I'd make it that you were an average player, and then it's just the hard work that made you win. Let's be real though, you were a skilled player. If people go and watch your 1.6 numbers, especially before when you were playing, like you say, second entry, you had fucking amazing spray. You definitely could headshot people. You had good pistols. You were a skilled CS player, right?
Yeah, I were, but still, I'll never say it. I don't see myself as talented like everyone else. I think the talent came with hard work. That's the honest answer I give, and that's something I still believe in. Surely I have talent to some extent, but I didn't have a talent like Forrest had. No, I didn't. My talent were to be the grinder and the one that sticks out the most because I learned the most. If you ask me.
Yeah, go on.
But yeah, like that's how at least I look on it.
What about this then? Because this might sound like a weird question to a fan, because everyone knows you started CSGO and you never lost a map for the first 87 and you won all the tournaments. So everyone's going to think that's awesome. But being as we all really at the time loved 1.6, and if we'd have all had if all the pros could have chosen in early 2012, does the game continue for a couple more years, or do we go straight to CSGO? We would probably actually choose to keep CSGO at 1.6 going, and then eventually one day maybe we transition, right? So when you swapped over, people might not know you were one of, if not the best player in the world. So do you ever feel like, what if? Because when I think of the players, my old school mates from 2003 or 2005, they got, like, basically, they don't ever have to ask what if. They played all the years they could play, they won all the championships they could win, and if they were not any good by 2009, then they just know that was where my career ended, that's where my motivation ended, that's when I wasn't, I had my chances. We can never really know if CS 1.6 continues what you could have done. Maybe you would be known as the best 1.6 player. Who knows? You could have won more majors. Do you ever wonder what if?
No. I think like the time period of transition to CSGO was the perfect time. I actually started to lose very much interest in 1.6 during that time period. I basically didn't even practice 1.6 that much anymore because CSGO came out.
Okay.
And everyone made fun of us who swapped over, at least the 1.6 people and fans and all that kind of stuff, because we, changed over too early, they say.
Yes.
But I believe it was the correct move, and I think that paid off in the end. But I just believed and thought that CSGO were more interesting than CSGO because it could connect two scenes that we didn't have before with Source and 1.6 together, because Source had a huge player base, not to the extent that 1.6 had, but they still had a huge professional scene. And for me, it's just like titles and all of those things are so important. Like, I'm a competitor and I want to win everything. But wouldn't it be cool to be successful also in another game that's similar to CS? That's where my mindset, that's how I looked on the transition to CSGO. Like, why not? It worked out in the end, so it's fine. But it would be sweet to be like, because there was always the debate like which one is better, CSGO, 1.6, all that kind of stuff. I think both of the games were great. I respect the history the CSGO players had, or the CS Source players had.
Yes.
Sorry, maybe I said it wrong there between it because it's
been
such a long time. But it is a thing that I always wanted to beat those guys because they were bragging about how good they were in Source.
Sure.
So that was basically my motivation for going to CSGO, where, to beat those Source guys. And I'll still remember to this day where Fiflaren and Freiburg were saying, Bear Games guys are the best players in the world because they were so dominant at Source and yada, yada, yada. And I agree, they were. And they can, be proud of being that. But wouldn't it be even better to beat those guys when everyone was always looking down on us because we came from the older engine? I think that's a sweet victory in a way.
Along those lines, actually, this perfectly connects. You've even named the two people, because obviously they came from Source. The funny thing is, it's actually funny you would say that story, coming into CSGO, because once you guys started winning and you were winning all the tournaments, and obviously people might know, the first, 4 tournaments or something that Very Games went to, they had to lose to you in the final. So it was you weren't just better than them, you were, consistently showing you were better. The funny thing is, to a fan, they kind of have the same mentality that actually, Freiburg and Fiflaren had at that time. NiP was always going to win these games, they were unbeatable. Even if you were down, of course, you were going to come back. And I actually think in some ways, some of the other good teams at the time get a little bit disrespected, because since you won everything, people act like they were all just trash and stuff. What did you think of the early competition, teams like Very Games, Western Wolves, these teams that were around in Virtus Pro? These were the teams you had to kind of beat to win the title. Was it as easy as it looked from the outside to win?
No, it weren't easy. I think people think it was easy because the game was that new and everyone wasn't mastering it yet. I don't see ourselves even mastering the game in the beginning. We were just, I don't know, we had the Swedish play style still in our bone, and that worked perfectly fine in the beginning of CSGO. And during the line, like 30 years, it changed to be more tactical heavy, like the Danish scene were in 1.6 and Source and all the very games where the French teams and all the guys that actually benefit them more, you know. But no, it weren't easy. I mean, I had huge respect for Vegas in the beginning. I loved their playstyle. I loved how Existed worked the teams. I loved, you know, their, you know, small ideas of how to, you know, do this, do that, etc., etc. You know, like, no, it weren't that easy because I had huge respect for all of those teams. And Western Wolves were up and coming team as well, and they beated us as well, and British Pro guys did eventually as well. They were also a very good team. Like, no, it weren't that easy as people may think. Like, there were so many times in that 87-0 streak we had that we were under games big times, and we miraculous turned it around and won the game. I have a small memory of the, I think it was Copenhagen Games 2013. I think it was 13. Yeah, this was still when we were like having the streak.
Yes.
And we played against the Virtus Pro guys on Dust 2, first map in this best of 3 because all games were best of 3, so that was amazing.
This was the upper bracket final, PSP or Woodrin. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And I remember we were CT on Dust 2, and I think we were under like 13-8 or something. And I stood on the car position on A long on Dust 2. And they were attacking short and long at the same time, and we were under like 4v3 or 2v4 or 3v4 or something like that. And I miraculous killed 3 people from car when they know exactly where I am, and I'm stuck. And this car thing on Dust 2 then were horrible. Like, if you went there, you know you can basically kill 1 if you were lucky enough.
Yes, it's like a one and done position. Yeah.
Yeah, like, but I miraculous killed like 2 or 3 people, and that turned around the game, and we won that map. You know, like. That was a big, important round for us because of the economy, and they were already leading and all that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of those games that happened. You know, like I can't mention or think about anyone else on top of my head right now, but I'm 99% sure there was a lot of those games that were under big scores, and we turned around and then we won the game. You know, and extended the streak. So during that time period, no, I could see us way more earlier losing that game than we did, to be honest. But we were just trusting each other and having, you know, the mentality that we're gonna win it, no matter what, and just give our best to win the game. You know, like that's how I looked at it and how we were different than other teams. You know, because I think also like later during the timelines, like when we play against the Danish guys before they became like, or eventually became Astralis. I think they had a problem against us in NiP even before we were the dominant team, where they had like a losing streak for like 1.5 years against us.
Sure.
You know, the mentality of everyone's team where, you know, like not the best, I guess, when they were playing against us. So they didn't have the right mindset going into the game. Maybe the Danish guys can answer that eventually. Like maybe they thought it was annoying play against us during that time period when they had that long losing streak against us. And eventually they won over us, you know, like eventually they started winning over us. So it's not like, you know, we're never lost against it. We did lose against them a lot of times. But it was special, especially after the 87 thing. And we had that streak against them, you know, like that no one else had, you know, like we were their kryptonite. And we were also losing big time during those games that we actually somehow won as well. So it is just cool, but still not going too way off topic, but like, the teams back then, they weren't that bad as people may think.
Sure. Even though, obviously, like we've described here, like, yeah, you know, it was because of like you were the guys that adapted to the game first, and then you, like you say, you even had a psychological edge over people once you had the record of beating them. Like, I also agree. I always thought, in my opinion, it also happens to just dominant champions anyway, even if it's not a streak. It's like there's a psychological component where not only do you think, well, I can beat anyone because I'm winning all the time, you have ultimate confidence, but then the opponent, when they've lost to you too many times, they start thinking about, you know, that's one of the factors I'm sure those Danish guys would tell us if they could talk to us. But what I want to ask was this. even though it was the beginning of the game and there wasn't majors and stuff, there must have been still something very special about this streak. Because as you say, even in the streak, you would be down 3-12, or I remember there was one on Nuke where like Very Games was on some insane CT half, and you had to do a comeback at ESEA. Like these were games that eventually you're supposed to lose a map here. Remember, we're not talking about you don't have to lose a series, just lose a map every now and then, of course. So like in the modern day, and even in back then, like nobody goes on win streaks like that. Like I would say if a team does 10 maps in a row without a loss, it's pretty fucking good if they're playing at tier 1. So the idea you guys did 87, like I don't care what version of CS, I don't think anyone will ever match that record, because I'm amazed you guys could do it. So what was the actual experience of being in a winning streak like that? I mean, it's all, like I say, it's already ridiculous if you go 10 maps without losing. Once you've reached like 50, 70, it must be getting almost silly at that point in time. You must feel like you're in the Matrix or something.
Oh, I think no one of us didn't really think about it, to be honest. I never really thought about it, at least. I mean, it was just a cool thing to have, but for us, it was just another day of the job, basically. Like, we were there to win the teams, and win the tournaments. We weren't there to just fuck around, basically. And I think that transition to my teammates, because my mentality when we started this team, where we're gonna win everything. I'm not going in there to do it half-half, like we win something and that's it. I want to go in there and dominate the game. At least that's how my mentality were. And I think it came to everyone else's mind afterwards when we won like the first final against the Very Games in DreamHack Valencia, I think it was.
Yes.
That we understood how good we were, and we can become even better, because that final, I think, was very close. I think we could have lost that as well, because that was the first time we actually met them. And they beat us in every practice.
Oh, okay.
We were terrible against them in practice, like really bad. But then in the same time, Very Games in that time period were very known of being unserious on practice, that they were known for recording demos, and then like
they were just trying to get your info, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So we were known for basically stomping the teams on practice, but also having this loose play style, so people thought of us being kind of unserious, but we weren't. And then you play against Very Games where you're like, okay, they're not even playing what they're supposed to be playing, because when you watch their games, they don't even play like it. So I remember we played them in the beginning, and then we stopped playing them completely. We never played against them in practice, because we were like, they're just there to just get information. Like, there's no point of playing this team, because we can be stumped or we can win them pretty easily. Both of us they are getting something out of it, but we're not getting anything out of it, because we didn't know the command or whatever it was they used to say the demos. But that at least were the rumor back in the day, so that's why we stopped completely playing against them in practice. But in the end, like this 87-0 streak, I think we understood it when we lost the game against Virtus.
Right.
I think that's the thing. We never really thought about it that much. We were more, just keep going forward and winning the tournaments. That's how I look at it, at least.
Right. What this might sound like just a random question, but I'll just ask it anyway. Right. Just so fans understand, if there had been a major early in CS, I'm talking about like this period where like you guys win it, right? You have another major in your trophy.
Yeah.
Cabinet.
I mean, 100%. I think we could have gone 2 extras at least.
Yeah.
Majors,
just wanted to ask.
Yeah. Like I think so, because we were that dominant in that time period.
Similarly, another thing people might not realise is, because I always tell people, the problem is when people hear 87, they think, wow, it's a lot of maps. It's like, that was only something like 10 tournaments or something, It wasn't like, it wasn't like 3 years or something. I always tell people, people think it lasted too long. But this is the problem. The fact that the 87 and 0, if I tell them it only lasted, let's say the first 7-8 months, they then will not understand this part, which is, I remember when you guys finally fell off sort of towards like I'm going to say like the summer into the autumn of 2014, right? That, I mean, fall off as in you don't win the tournament anymore. You still had an insane record of consistency. I remember I once did an article about where I counted it. And if we count all lands, so we're also counting, like some of the small like Swedish qualifiers where you'd pay the next best Swedish team. So sure, they aren't all tier 1 lands, but these are all generally lands with some good competition. And some of them are all the big tier 1 circuit. I think your team went something crazy. Like, I think it was like 27 lands in a row where you never placed below top 4. So like a bad day was just just losing the semi-finals. Like that's the level you guys are at. And this is like covering, like I say, like a couple of years. So like that again, that's another one of those records where you can take that and put it against anything that the great teams are doing today or in the early days of any version of the game. Like that level of consistency is almost impossible. How does a team do that? What are the cores? What do you think you have to have as a team to be able to have consistency like that?
I mean, it surely helps to have like one of the best players in the team, or combine more than just 1, 2, maybe 3, but have a core value in the team, like that you're supposed to be winning together, not individually. That's how I look at it, at least. Like, because at the end of the day, it's like if you're gonna win games and win tournaments, you can't just be winning by yourself and just being there as a team. You know, you have to have friendships, you have to be history, you have to have, how do you say, camaraderie?
Camaraderie. It's like, yeah, we're like friendly with each other. Yeah, sure, you've got a good relationship.
Exactly, and I think that's the core value of the team, like that we had. You know, like it's very important, and I think a lot of teams should have that. You know, like. And we had this similar mentality where we already discussed with FNATIC, you know, always being the good friends, all those kind of things. You know, the team should be working together because of that reason. You know, like the team don't need to have the best players. It's gonna work. You know, it has to have a really good friendship aura in the team. You know, and we had that. You know, like we trusted everything, and it helped a lot to have like Fifth Line, who was very smart about the game and very understanding about tactics and understanding about how it's supposed to be played, and Freiber, also the up-and-coming Source player, who was amazing as well. And then having us other 3, like this, me, and Forrest, you know, coming in with the 1.6 mentality, you know, like travel a lot. We're not pretty more than at least some other teams were doing, and competing against the best all the time, you know, like knowing, you know, directly when it goes live, it's business. We're going to win this, and we're going to come out as victorious. If we don't, we're gonna crush them next time. That's how the team went with.
In this early period of CSGO, obviously, like we say, you were already, I mean, people remember almost from the first tournament, you were the best player, basically. And Forrest was very, very good as well. And the team in general had like all these strengths, everyone in their roles, doing their job. Like you said, like maybe the Swedish style, and obviously you transitioned early. But was CSGO a game that you had like natural feel for? Like when you first encountered it, did something make sense about it? Because I know a lot of the 1.6 players, if I go ask my mates, you know, Trace and Neo, they're going to tell me, no, it was Alien, you know, I didn't really, you know, it felt like it wasn't CS or whatever, because obviously they had struggles early. So how would you so good from the beginning?
I looked at a game as a different game completely. Because the game is, or were, I mean, or not is, were in the beginning trash. It was bad. It was really, really bad. I think everyone agreed to it, even me agreed to it. Like, it was bad. But I took it in as a completely new game. And let's say I went from 1.6 to like a Call of Duty game. Of course, I'm going to be trash at it. Of course, I'm going to be like, I need time to learn it, even though I master another game. It's going to take time, you know. So I took in consideration is like, you know, this game is completely new and it has nothing to do with 1.6. In the beginning, you didn't. Like, it was different mechanics, different how you throw the nades, different how you were understanding the game itself, etc., etc. Like, the game for me was just completely different.
One of the players that is so key in the storyline of the early NiP was the reason Very Games finally broke through. Because if people don't know, they had some crazy streak. I think it was like 7 series, like 14 maps they lost. And remember, this, you know, not winning any maps even in these series. When they finally broke through, people might understand it's when shox came to the team and they got him in, and he was a very good player. And in fact, the cool thing was, if people like at the moment this Battle of Zebu and Simple, that was Get Right and shox back then. It was like everyone in the world agreed one of these two players is the best player. And in fact, they kind of like do it like they do with the teams now. It's like whoever wins the tournament, they're probably going to say that player's the better player. Yeah. Right? What did you think about this battle? Because obviously you two battled for a long time in your careers, and it was kind of a classic as well, because you also had like similarities to the players. Like, he's a great clutcher, he's a guy who has his own playing style. Did you enjoy this battle?
Yeah, to some extent, but I never looked at like it was a battle between me and him. It was a battle of us, both our teams, to go out the victorious. Like, it is nice to have a battle against someone else, because then you can see and motivate yourself to become even better than you were before. But I didn't really see it as that because I think people are starting to understand it more. I mean, you know that, and other people know it. They're unseen. I'm very friendly with a lot of people. You know?
Yes.
I'm traditional Swedish person. You know, like I'm not that laid back. You know, I like to hang out with other teams and players. You know, get to understand them, know them. You know, understanding their thought about the game. You know, whatever it is. You know, I want to be more social and friendly with them. You know, even though if I were the best player or anything like that. So I saw always shox as a friend of mine because I got to know him, you know. I never saw him as an enemy or someone that, you know, like that. I saw him like directly when he come into the server. I don't know him. He's my competitor, and that's the person I need to be to win the game with my team. That's how I look between us two, you know. But then after the game, you know, there's some picture on the internet with me, Smits, and even him, you know, hugging it out afterwards because we were close friends. And we took it to that bone, if you ask me, and I saw it as a beautiful relationship between us because we motivated each other to be even better than we were the day before, you know. But I never really took like a battle, like, okay, I need to beat this guy or this is my nemesis or anything like that. No, I never saw it like that. No, at least he maybe think it differently, but I never saw it like that because maybe I was a little bit too friendly in that way because I saw him as a friend. Or see him as a friend. So I don't know.
Right, when the first major happened, DreamHack Winter 2013, the actual storylines was amazing. It's actually perfect that you guys had that documentary crew, because in some ways, it looked like it was a movie, because just before was where suddenly Very Games breaks through, and they beat you guys 3 times, they win a couple of times, they become the #1 team. Yep. So when the first major happens, it's kind of like that question I asked earlier. Everyone knows you would have won the majors if they were at the end of 2012 and early 2013, but finally, we had a real world championship with all this big prize money, and finally, it wasn't like, obviously NiP wins, it's like, no, let's see who wins. There's these 2 teams, and maybe the other one's even in position now. So everyone remembers, famously, you guys met in the semi-finals, and you guys won in 3 maps. It was just like, it wasn't like as great a third map, unfortunately. It wasn't like, you know, like FaZe versus Cloud9, but obviously the context of the match was epic. Like, everyone was wanting to see what would happen in this one. But the problem is, in the movie, obviously then you'd win the final, and, you know, you'd be the champions. But then in the final, I still think that's one. Like, I still can't really understand how FNATIC won that game, and that's not a disrespect to those guys. They later went on and did amazing things, but can you explain it to me? Because listen, we're not being rude to them if we say, like, when you beat Very Games in that semis, I'm pretty sure in your brain you must have thought like we're going to win the major.
Yeah, 100%. I felt it like it was the final of that tournament, and when we won it, it felt like we were winning it, you know. But I remember to this day we made a huge mistake to actually go eat kebab pizza before the finals, so the energy level wasn't the best.
Right.
So I still remember to this day about it, but then at the same time, I feel like, you know, that's 2 game. The first one that we lost 16-14, I think.
Yes. Because it could have been 2-0 otherwise. Yeah, you're right. That was the one where, if people don't remember, that was basically the reason why Flusher started to become a massive name, because he did this crazy like 1v2 or whatever in the B bomb set that kind of decided the game. Yeah.
Yeah. But they punished us a lot during that game that I didn't think we were gonna be punished by. They went a lot of short on A side, and, you know, did a lot of cool stuff unnecessary for them to win the game. You know, and they had the in a way perfect timing a lot of runs when I look through it time to time, and hit those shots that basically no one didn't really do in that time period. The only team that actually did those was like kind of like Very Games with shox, you know, 1 taps from short and scream.
Right.
And I think Pronax went out 1 run on short alone, or he had his teammate behind him and he killed like both of the guys on A, like me and Fire, who had off, you know, like it felt like, because I think we had also like 12-3 first half, and they made a huge comeback the second half and won at 16-14. And then we stomped in our second map, and then eventually we got stomped the last map.
Yes.
But I think like the mindset before the final, where, you know, we already won, you know. So I think that was, we didn't, I wouldn't say we took out the win already, but I think back in our head, I think we felt it like that. And I think that was the biggest mistake we did before that final, where we thought we already won, you know. I think that's the huge problem with that final, where, like, I think Vogo said it to this day, who became later on their coach in FNATIC. I think he said it, at least in a Swedish interview later on during the years, that he said that we should have won that final, and they should have won, like, for example, the Cologne final, which we won.
Yeah, I like that would be more fair if each team got the win like that way. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because FNATIC were up and rising. They weren't the best team exactly that
No.
when we won the major there, but they were basically that team. You know, people were starting recognizing them as like one of the best or the best team in the world. They became the best team in the world after that.
Yes, basically right after, yeah.
Yeah, so I agree to that to some extent, but then eventually I also felt like we should have won the DreamHack finals, made it the first major. But I think that the best one for the storyline were that Bergen should have been in the finals. But then Complexity shouldn't have done their deep run, which they did during that tournament because they beat Very Games in the group play.
Yeah. There was a lot of crazy results in that tournament, actually, yeah.
And that,
what about this then? Because along these lines then, like one of the things, since like I said, I know from 1.6, sometimes you could even win a tournament, but if you felt like you didn't play well yourself, you would almost feel like guilt, like, oh, did I practice enough? Or did I let people down? Or, you know, I only won because that guy had a good game, right? This might sound weird to a fan, because again, a fan hasn't, because they haven't lived this life, they just look at the upside and they think, wow, that'd be so amazing. Like, I'd love to win a major, right? You won 3 majors in your career. You won 2 in 1.6 and then you won this one in CSGO. But the problem is, you were also in a lot of major finals and you lost them. So you saw, for example, like Neo and Taz win them and the Na'Vi win them and, you know, different players depending on what era we're talking about. FNATIC, obviously, right? Do those ones, if you think about them, do they haunt you a bit? Like, can you just look at it and go, listen, everyone can have a bad day? Or does part of you feel like every final's winnable?
I think all of those finals that we played and lost, I think it was winnable afterwards, except one, and that's the one against Virtus Pro in Katowice.
Sure, they were pretty dominant there. Fair enough.
Yeah, that's the only final I feel like that's the final we should have lost. Like that's how I look at it. The other ones I feel like we at least had a chance, but we didn't take it. Like that's how I feel like the difference between those other finals. The FNATIC final, the first one, felt like we fucked up like big time. More, they played amazingly and they deserved
for sure.
100%. I agree to that. Like even afterwards, I did. I felt just devastated afterwards, big time. At the one in Katowice, I felt pretty okay with that because we got so stumped in that final. But I'm so disappointed with that final because leading up to that final, I think I had like one of my best tournaments in my life, and also like the team itself, we were so on par and everything. Like so much study. Fifline was the game leader. Like we did everything like a team is doing basically nowadays in that time period. The third one, I mean, that was like, I think I said it on the interviews, like that was a make or break it tournament for us. If we didn't win that one, I think the team would fall apart, which we eventually did.
Yes, yeah, but it staved it off a couple of months maybe, yeah.
Yeah. DreamHack finals, the winter one against LDLC with Michael Lille. We had 15-13 on the last map.
Yes, your championship point.
And also another round that was very important. They did a retake on the B side on overpass. I think it was 4v3 for us. And they ran bridge instead of normal down pit on the B side. And they took us way off guard. No one weren't peeking there. Like, it was on us. The one in Katowice against FNATIC the third time.
That was epic.
That was epic. Fine. I think I watched it a week ago or something again. I look back to the finals sometimes, even though it hurts me to look to the ones that you lose. But I look to them time to time because I learn more by it in general. That one felt like we could have won, but not.
Yes.
Maybe not really when you think about it, because FNATIC had such a huge lead on the last map. But we could have done it. Played much better on the last map. That at least how I can look at it. And that sucks mostly because when I think about that final when we lost that, is because it sucks so hard because we brought in Alu. I think that year in general was a pretty decent year for us.
Oh, for sure. You're still a good team.
Yeah, the sad part is that we never won anything. That was the worst part. And that was the sad part for Alu when he joined us. Like, I think we were in like 5 or 6 finals that year. We lost all of
sure.
them. So or we won one, but that was not that big one. And we still had Michael in it. But when we had Allo, like there were so many times I felt like we could have won it or should have won it, you know, but we didn't. I mean, surely I know LNC or Envious, who were called, they stumped that in some finals as well. So it weren't, you know, it weren't like all finals, of course, that full year. But some of them we could at least have won, you know. But in general, like, yeah, like I think like how many finals were 5 in a row we were in finals in the major ones. We won one of them. I would have said at least 2 of them, maybe 3, we could have actually have won of them, if you ask me. But then in the same time, it doesn't really haunt me that much. Surely I'm pissed that we didn't win about it. I probably think about it time to time, but then at the same time, I had such a long career and a very, very good career, and longer that some other people didn't have. And I'm very like happy that I actually got the opportunity to do it for such a long time. No, I'm not pissed about it. I'm not sad about it. Surely it comes time to time, but it's part of life. Someone has to be that guy sometimes.
True.
And sucks it had to be me and my guys, you know. But then at the same time, like I'm just happy that they did like they did FNATIC, for example, and the NVS guys and the Virtus Pro guys and all the things, you know. But that's also probably because of the issue I said before, that I'm friends with a lot of them, you know. So I don't know. I'm also very happy for them. But it's actually it was me on the other end, you know.
Obviously, from the end of 1.6, where they won a couple of majors off you, like a bunch of the ones that you lost were basically the Pauls. It was the Neo and Taz team, and then obviously there was the Katowice one in CSGO, right? At one point in time, these guys kind of were the nemesis of your teams, right? Yeah. And classically, they also used to win, where it's like they never stomped you. It was always, except for the Katowice, that was actually the rare example. Usually it would be, you know, those epic games where it's an overtime or it's a 16-14, and then what happened is someone, could be anyone on their team, would just win the clutch, or, you know, they'd get the miracle round you need to win it, right? One thing I always thought was very cool about your career is at that point in time, funny, it's kind of like they do nowadays. People used to still be like, oh, does this team choke? Like, do these players break under pressure and stuff? And what's cool is you got to have like the full life cycle of starting out in that position and having people do that to you. And then later, you got to be in that position. You were the dominant team. I mean, what's funny is that one of the cool stories I think is, if people are marveling at this amazing Astralis core that did all this stuff these last couple of years, you guys used to do that to them. You were like the big brothers, you know, keeping them down. And they, every time they thought they were in form and they'd had a good tournament and they got to play you, it didn't matter what they did in the game almost. It didn't matter even if they were the better team. Like the craziest one to me was when they were TSM and they really were the better team, but you would still get them in the key moments. So is it satisfying to kind of like get into the position where you're the one who kind of is the, like, I know it sounds weird to say it, you're the one breaking their hearts, but you're the one who comes through in the big moments?
I mean, it feels nice. Surely it does. But then in the same time, you know, like for example, when you look back on, for example, Astralis right now, which in my opinion, and I probably just say it out loud instead and do and mention more, they are the best team of all time in CSGO because of their record. There's no debate to it, if you ask me. We'll see. Maybe someone will take it over. Who knows?
Sure.
We never know. But if you ask me, because of the long streak, they are. Because it's such a longer time period when you look at it. But I still remember to this day when I think it's one of the weirdest one, especially against the Danish guys, when they were on the TSM and we played Cluj-Napoca major?
Yes, the quarterfinals.
The quarterfinals against them, we got stomped by now in the game after, so it was nothing big with that one. But we played pretty decent for being a team that actually had folded, so we weren't a team anymore. But the thing is, like, TSM were the favorites to win it, like heavy favorites to win that tournament because they were such a good team in that time period. Like I think they won a couple of tournaments before that, and they were considered, like, FNATIC had their dip, and then
it was them and Envy were the top teams at the time.
Exactly, and I don't feel sad about it. It's always beautiful to stomp the team, or like not stomp, but win over the team that's the favorites to win it. But it felt weird in that way because that major, especially that one, felt like that's their major to win, if you ask me.
Sure.
Because after that, I don't think, I mean, surely nowadays became a normal thing that everyone's not gonna try to, like, not think that Astralis is gonna win the final in a major, because now eventually they've done it a couple of times more. But like the first one they won, I don't think that many people were counting them in. I think you were one of the ones that actually.
I was one of the few people, yeah. Even I was a bit nervous when they were playing that first pro game, mate. I was thinking they was going to lose.
Yeah, and that was a tough game to watch, because that was one of the bad moments in my life or my playing career where we weren't playing the majors. But I remember watching that final in Stockholm in one of those. I actually watched that final in like a sports bar, so it was quite interesting to watch it. It was during that time period, it was not pretty normal to do it, so it was pretty cool to see it, and everyone cheering and all that kind of stuff. It was full as well for being in Sweden. It was pretty interesting. But I remember that final map, you know, Virtus Pro against Astralis, when Astralis were leading, and then Astralis just going full out rushes yard and winning those duels. It was amazing to see, you know, but it was not so many people, like you're saying. You were one of the few ones, and probably a very nervous one as well, because you already said it out loud. There's a talent of the major in that specific major, saying, know, if Astralis win this, they're gonna take the whole thing. It's a big statement, you know. There's not so many people who were there to do that, but you did, and I think that's cool, because you told everyone to basically like, it happened. Like, I was right the whole time. But I don't know, like, it is a good, nice feeling to be, you know, time to time being the team that stomps other teams and that kind of thing. But I see it like during my whole career as like a learning curve, and I would explain it in a way that can sound bad but pretty good. Like, no matter what happened during my whole career, I would probably say like I learned the most for the difficult times and the winning in both times. But winning and being a guy that stomps a lot of teams and that kind of things, it is beautiful to some extent, but not the whole way, if you ask me.
Right. One thing we have to address in that sense is, this is one of the areas where I wish actually we'd had, like, I know that obviously you had that one before the major, the documentary crew, but I wish we'd had, like, you know, proper, like, produced, like, amazing quality level, like, sports documentaries, basically. Yeah. Because obviously there's so much kind of, like, footage we'll never have now, and stories that's hard to tell. We can only kind of tell the stories ourselves in words. Yeah. But one of the ones I always thought I wish I could tell is two of the players. Obviously, they're two of my favourites, you and Device. I already liked you as players anyway. Like, your game style's very different. By the way, you both had similar stories. People were always questioning you until you won and saying they're playing, like, you know, they're baiting, whatever. You know, there's the similarities there. You had to overcome these things and win in finals. But one of the things like that makes me, beyond the game, just as humans, respect you both incredibly, is the way that you both not only, like, battled through pretty harsh illness, but you were winning your championships while the illness was there. It's one thing if you were still just a good player. If people don't know, this period when NiP was winning all the tournaments in the beginning of the game was when you had these issues with your stomach. Device, obviously, that literally happened. He got that issue, I think, before they even went on the run with Astralis, winning all that. So to me, to be able to do that, that's mental. Like, it's not like you physically found some magic cure, right? I mean, from what I remember back in the day, you had a similar thing to him, right? The stress of playing in a final can trigger that. What meal you had before, like, we all know it back in the day, if you go to a tournament, you might have to just eat a burger from the bar. There's no way you can go to get dinner, right? So how did you battle through it? Explain what it was like. Like, what would it be like on an average tournament if you're having these issues? Like, what would happen? How would you battle through it?
Well, for me especially, since every day is a new day for me. Even today it is. But now it's much better because, I mean, I didn't help myself because I was a long time smoker as well. Nowadays I can be at least open with it because I've changed and stopped completely. I'm so happy with that. It's the best choice I've done in my health and my life, if you ask me. Before I was a little bit, you know, I didn't want to be honest with it. I felt ashamed of it a little bit. So.
Right.
So that's why I never wanted to say it out openly about it. But I can do it nowadays. And also I'm a little bit older. But every day was a new day. I could wake up with stomach pain directly. And it just felt horrible. Like, I could basically, like, I'm like falling down on my seat and just like, I'm not just basically just sitting and playing. It felt like, it was tough. It was pain in the ass, if you ask me. because I never knew how my body is gonna react to one specific day, and I think it's similar to Device, or Nico. I don't know exactly his story. I know he's been very honest with it and open with it to some extent. It's me as well, but for me, it was just like, I remember in the early, like especially during the dominance days, I think we played in Germany. It was one of those worst, not Bayek tournament, but one of the worst one. It was like very much delay and all that kind of stuff. We played there just from the final, like 5 in the morning or something like that. And I remember my stomach disease were so bad, like really motherfucking bad, that I couldn't eat or drink before I need to hit the toilet. And I think I went to the toilet during that final day, like 8, even more, like 30 times plus, because I couldn't eat or drink, like at all. And I needed the energy and the water or the drinks or whatever to be having a high level of energy for playing a best of 3 game. But I couldn't. So I just sit there and eat a little bit, and then like, oh, I need to go to the toilet. And I maybe took a bite, that's it, you know, and then I need to go to the toilet. And then I'm like, after like a half an hour, I'm like, maybe I should need to get more because I haven't eaten anything. Go back, eat again, go to the toilet again, or drink water. And like, oh, I need to go to the toilet because I can't have it in my stomach, you know, like, or go through. So through the years, it was painful. Like that could happen. It also couldn't happen. So some days I just woke up pretty normally and didn't have any stomach pain. And I'm like, oh, everything's fine and blah, blah, blah. The group stage went fine. All of a sudden, then quarterfinals comes. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm fucked again. Can't do anything about it. But I think that was just like my mentality, my strength, you know, because I don't want to be the burden of the team of losing a game. I just want to go forward and be the best player I could be, and even better than I were the day before or the same day, you know. I think like during my career, I think I had 3 huge crashes completely where I couldn't really play because I was also used to the pain because I went 23 years of my life I have stomach pain, so I know the burden of having it. But when I started taking the medicines and all that kind of stuff, so it was weird for me to not have stomach pain. So I noticed it even more when I had stomach pain, for example. But like ESWC 2014, when Variegason were the uprising with Shoxy or Shox, and we played against them in the semis. I had to go lay on the ground in some sort of a booth somewhere because I couldn't basically sit up or stand up because I was like so dizzy and my body was just reacting everything I ate and drink. One of the Star Ladder finals, we played against Astana Dragons. The Ukrainian guys, they knew about my stomach issues, so they were very okay with me taking breaks, like during the game. But we played against Astana Dragons in a game that was like such a long game. I think we played overtimes and all that kind of stuff. We eventually lost the game. And I know for sure I couldn't sit at all. Like I was just basically a person there, not doing anything. I was just there as a human being. Hope the game is over, basically. At least that's how I felt.
Did you ever seriously think like maybe I have to quit?
A couple of times. I mean, the third one, the biggest one, was in 2016 when I was put in a hospital for almost 3 weeks, and the doctors told me I'm not allowed to travel and I'm not allowed to play because they need me to be on meds and drops, and my stomach isn't reacting well to the medicine, and my human body is not working as it should be. That was a very tough period in my life, and also I had personal issues outside of the game. I didn't have a home, especially during that time period. And we were still competing and playing and all that kind of stuff, so it was very tough. And then put in the hospital at the same time was a very tough moment in my life. It's very, very tough. Very painful one as well, in a lot of ways. But I remember the doctors came in to me and I said, I have 3 tournaments coming up in 2 weeks. One in Brazil, one in Atlanta, and one in Moscow. Can I go? And she just looks at me. I'm like the most stupidest person ever. And she's like, why are you even thinking that? And I'm like, well, I feel much better. And I was like lying, of course, because I wanted to compete and play. And she was like, you can't go up with this lifestyle that you're doing. You can't do this to yourself anymore because this is going to end very badly. Like really badly. Do you really want to sacrifice that? And I'm just sitting there. I'm like, yeah, without even like hesitating at all. Like, yep, I'm done. And she was like, even brought in like 7 more doctors and all that kind of stuff, trying to convince me of like not going and doing these things. And they were saying like, we're trying a new meds on you, so we don't know if we can let you go either. Like, because we need to have you here so we can take tests directly if it's necessary, if it doesn't react well, etc., etc. But eventually the medicine started working on me during the 2nd week or the 3rd week or whatever it was, because it felt like forever when I was lying in that room. And it worked good in that way because the medicine worked out good and I started to feel better, but not in a good, stable way. And they told me specifically, but you can't smoke anymore. Like, you can't fucking smoke anymore because it's going to end up even worse now if you do it with this medicine. And I'm like, okay, sure. Whatever is necessary for me to just leave this room and go travel again. And they just start looking at me again. I'm like, this is the stupidest person I'm talking to. That's where their face is. They didn't say that, but like, you know, sure. I know what they were thinking and saying, like in their eyes and mind, you know. But yeah, I was starting in one of those days at least, starting to believe like maybe I should just quit because my health is not keeping up. But as a competitor and as a person who hates to be not left behind, but more like a reasoning for not competing, or it felt like the burden on myself because I take way too much responsibility on myself. I don't want to be the person, you know. I don't want to be the reason for disappointing other people. That's where my mindset. So yeah.
Right, to switch the topic a little bit, right, this is a question. This is actually a topic we have literally never discussed, even in private conversations, because I've actually never discussed it with anyone from NiP. So I want to ask, which is, if we rewind a second, when it was 2015, and this was the year where, as you said, you didn't really win the championships. You were still like at the beginning of the year, you were one of the better teams. Obviously, you were in the major final and stuff. Even at your worst, you'd usually be like semi-final team. Like, it's still a bad tournament, would probably be quarterfinals. You know, it's still one of the top, like, I'd say 5-6 teams in the world. It's just that there was a lot of competition. During this time period is when I came up with that term, NiP magic, right? Which is what I used to say whenever you would sort of upset win over a team that you were favoured to lose to, right? Yeah. Now, what people won't know is this, is at the time, everyone in NiP fucking hated that term because as far as I can tell, I'm going to guess, like, I think you guys thought I was doing it to be like, you know, if you win, it doesn't count, you know, it's like magic and, you know, the other team was supposed to win. So I know, for example, there was a final, like, it was one of the Gfinity finals where when I came out, like, I tried to come up to you and do, like, you know, like high five or something. You were just like, fuck off, like, because you must have heard me like doing the commentary after the game, like, oh, there's no NiP magic in this game or something, you know. And I know the NiP guys didn't like it. Now, obviously later, especially once you got acclimatized to the fact you're not going to win every tournament anymore, you know, it's a different day and time. What's funny is, not only did you guys warm up to it, but I actually think most of those players from that classic NiP lineup love that term now. Like, they love, I know it's fucking Forest always has that like graphic they made, and people that like the t-shirt and stuff. And now I even saw they started using it on Twitter. So like, what was why did it bother you so much initially? Because I have to say, right, I'm not saying this just to say I made a genius concept. Like, it was something I just thought of in the moment. But if I look at the later days, especially when you would win those tournaments out of nowhere, it's kind of cool actually. Like, I thought it was kind of like an interesting storyline.
It is. To be honest, I have no answer to that. That's the honest answer. I think we just took it badly. Like, I don't know why we took it badly. It doesn't make any sense that we took it badly either. But we just took it wrongly. Like, that's the thing. And eventually we understood it more and more. And I think it's a way more fitting thing to that team and later on in the stage. The only problem I have with it nowadays, maybe, is that that saying is more to it fits us, the older generation. I think it doesn't fit, it doesn't really fit maybe the newer guys in a
no, it doesn't really make sense to say it now, does it? No.
Yeah, in a way, but then at the same time, maybe it comes to the point as well, so it makes sense again. But then that time period, for us, it didn't make sense, and we took it way wrongly than we should have done, if you ask me. And that's the honest answer. To this day, I love the thing, like the whole NiP magic thing, but I know for sure I got pissed every time that I heard it in the beginning, and I still don't know why. Like, I think we just took it so badly wrong. And when you think about it and look at it, it's nothing bad. It is a good thing. It's like, you know, what is that saying? You know, Goliathus and
David and Goliath.
Yeah, like it's basically like that saying in a way, but in a more modern age. You know, like everyone is saying, you know, Goliath is gonna win, right? That's
Yes.
the whole thing, you know. And we're the underdogs, so it is not a bad thing when you think about it. But I don't know. Like I said, we took it so fucked up wrong. And that's the honest answer, at least from my head. I don't know if someone else, maybe Freiburg, maybe Forrest. I know Forrest, like I said, he loves it nowadays. But you know, we were just stupid kids.
Sure. Because the thing is, like I say, it's actually like, I mean, even when I came up with that term, actually, you hadn't had a lot of the finals people now probably remember as NiP Magic. But it's one of those weird things where it became more true than even I thought of. I thought of it as a throwaway comment, you know, like a witty thing to say. Yeah. But the funny thing is, it's such an awesome way to describe what happened. Because if people know the later period, 2016, 2017, some of the championships you won at this point in time, they're all amazing. They're all like crazy underdog wins, like the Malmos, the IM Aucklands, obviously, Star Series. Like these were incredible because these were the time period where you weren't the best, right? You weren't the number one team. In fact, most times the team playing you was like everyone thought that team was going to win. So, like, what do you think it is? Because I notice this seems to be a trend, right? That when someone's a champion and they drop off a bit, they might not be the best team, but they still sort of remember how to win the matches or something like that. Because I've noticed that's kind of what I always thought you guys did to the TSM guys, for example. Like they might have been better, but do they know how to win in the big game? Do they know how to win when it's pressured? You know, what do you do in that scenario? So what do you think of this era when you were kind of like winning these championships out of nowhere? It would kind of keep things going, you know, kept it interesting.
Never thought about it, to be honest. I don't know. I don't think I have an answer. I never thought about it. I need to think a little bit about it.
I'll give you an example. I noticed when you did your like retirement speech, basically, where you wrote that thing out, one of the things that I'd never thought of this way is because, again, I'm used to following the tournament. Like, I can remember a lot of the details, like the chronology of it, like who was the number one team at the beginning. So, for example, when I think of the Malmo final, the first one, to me, it's like, what the fuck? Navi was supposed to win this. You know, like everyone thought they were going to win that game. Yeah. Like it was, like in fact, you had like a hard game against Godsent in the semis. Like everyone thought, oh, this is for sure Navi. So at the time when you did that NiP Magic win, I was like, yeah, it's a cool story. But I never realised actually that thing that you told me, which is like, let's face it, there haven't been many really big tournaments in Sweden at that point in time, except for in Jönköping, and that was like a very different environment, you know. So the idea that you did win one of those, like in front of the Swedish crowd in a way where it's super unexpected, that must have been a really special. I can see why it would be so meaningful for you in that sense, because as you said, to give the Swedish fans like a trophy.
Yeah, I mean, it was because like we had in a way a semi-curse of not winning the big ones in Sweden in general, felt like.
Yes.
I think we won the ones in Jönköping, all that kind of stuff. But you know, for example, the one in Globen or the Globe, you know, winning that one in the beginning, especially with the hype, you know, FNATIC and NiP is here. None of us won. The French guys actually won, you know.
Yes.
Like there's a storyline to that, you know. So for me, it's like that win means so much because I think even Barlow said it in one of those videos there's out there on me, you know, like that I play for the fans. And I do play for the fans for years. They're the ones that actually kept me forward. It doesn't need to be necessary just the Swedish ones, for example, but I feel more closer to those ones in a way. So that's why I'm saying it, you know, it's a very meaningful one for me and for my whole career where, you know, winning that one and give it back to the Swedish audience that's been sitting and waiting for us to win the big ones in Sweden specifically means the world to me. Like, surely I wanted to win, you know, the first major in Sweden and surely in Jönköping, but that also would be a huge win, you know, a huge memory in my career, you know. But winning it there in Malmö in front of like basically felt like everyone had a NiP jersey on him and cheering for us, it means the world. And especially like I said, we had a rough game against Godsent and now we were, you know, the final team in the final. Surely cArn started to have his huge issue with his arm.
True.
So we had, you know, a little bit more positive side for us, you know, saying we could win this game. But that win meant a lot for every one of us, especially hopefully for the fans as well who was there watching it, you know. That's a memory that's gonna be there for the rest of my life.
When earlier on, when I was asking you about losing the majors and, the ones that get the haunt or whatever, like, I actually liked the answer you gave where you said sort of like, if you sort of take a look back and you look at your whole career, you obviously had a really good career. Like, look at all the championships you won. If you frame it this way, right, so you were still, like, obviously you won Auckland in the end of 2017. If we look at how long, like, you winning championships in 2009, you're still winning in 2017. That's 10 years, like 10 full years where you're winning championships almost every year. Like, yeah, maybe not 2015 in terms of big ones. But aside from that, almost every year's championships come in, you're still in the mix at least to win championships. You've had an amazing career as a competitive CS player, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, surely, I think one of the questions answered, not here, but in interviews in general, was like, do I have any regrets in general? More and more when I think about it, no, I don't really have any regrets. Like, it sucks, of course, not to win some of the finals there and there. Like, it's always going to be there, or maybe some of the root changes to have through the years and yada 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 yada. But in the same time, I'll do it any given day again. No questions asked. Like, I had such a wonderful career, and I couldn't ask for a better fans to be following me and players that I play with and everything, regarding it. So I'm just happy in that regard, and especially for those who knows me really really well with what I've gone through my whole career. Like, there's no point of feeling ashamed or feeling like, oh, I should have won that, and it would be like the top of the iceberg of my career. No, like, I would say, like, it's the journey. Like, life is a journey, and you decide how the journey is gonna go. And if you want it to be even better and bigger as you imagine it, you have to go and grind for it. And I did everything in my powers to even do it in that way that I wanted to make it. So no, I don't really have any big, huge regrets regarding it. Surely, one that really sticks out that it's the whole, maybe the incident with the FNATIC in the early stage.
Right, yeah, the Bucharest thing.
Yeah,
with the
but at the same time, I don't feel like there's a point of talking about it because that's under the rug. Me and JW has become much better friends today. I will say it like this: we were kids.
Yes. I actually have a question along those lines that maybe you can answer. Because one thing I want to ask is this. I know publicly there never was any like massive beef or whatever, except maybe that weird period where there was the dream hack where people thought everyone cheated or whatever. Like that, whatever, we'll put that out of mind. That was just a weird, crazy 2-week period in CS. So the question I have is this. I know technically FNATIC players have played for NiP, but they're not the FNATIC players you think of as FNATIC. It's like Lecro and Dennis. Like, that doesn't really count in my opinion. When we talk about FNATIC and NiP, we mean like the classic NiP and we mean the FNATIC that won the majors. Basically the teams that won the majors. When you think about the French scene, pretty much everyone by the end played with everyone. Like, they all, depending on where your career is, eventually, you cycle players in and out, and this guy leaves, and this guy gets kicked, and then this guy comes back, and eventually they all played with everyone. Yeah. Similar in the Danish scene, a lot of them played with each other, or the top players all got to play in the right teams. One of the crazy things about Sweden is you had these two amazing cores of players, and none of them played together, ever. Even to this day, was there any reason? Like I know, for example, JW at one point was going to come at one, but was there any reason there wasn't like a crossover, or you didn't go to FNATIC, or someone didn't come to NiP? Can you think of a reason?
I mean, they never asked me, for example. So in that way, no, I don't know. But I know for a fact, at least how I look and understand why they never asked me, because they had Flusha. Me and him were very similar in playing style.
Sure.
So that wouldn't make any sense because he was also like in his prime, I guess. I know they asked Forrest, I think, 30 years, but he always said no as well. AW was supposed to come to us, I think, one time. But then at the same time, I don't know, like during that time period, I never were involved regarding those things, and I never really were in the end as well. So
yeah, maybe you should say something about that, by the way, because actually one thing that's interesting about your career is, like, in theory, the easiest way to win is the second a lineup isn't working, you just get a player who's really good right now and you try and just chop and change. But actually, I know that's one of the things people might not understand about you. You were never really the person involved with that, right? Even if you were the best player, you can let the others handle that, right?
I mean, I were in the earlier stage, yes, I were. I were a lot involved with that because I always thought like how a team should be played and like how it should be built up and all that kind of stuff. But later during the years, I never took any at least how I remember it. Maybe I'm wrong, but no, I never really had any like debates about it. I think there's no, not that I know of at least. Maybe I'm wrong. Someone could probably tell me that I'm wrong or whatever. I don't know, but not that I know. For example, I didn't know that. For example, AEW were supposed to come to us. At least till I saw the news about the rumor thing. Maybe it was true, maybe not. I don't know. Like that's one of the things that I can come up with my top of my head.
Sure.
I think I did one time joke to all of them to come to us, but that never happened. I never think it was serious. Maybe it was. I don't know. Maybe the organization asked. I don't know. At least I joked about it, but no, I don't know. Like, but I think at the same time, that's one of my regrets. I think I should have taken a more stand. I think because in the end of the day, you know, like I know how to build good, great, amazing teams, and I should probably taken more into that and really done it in a better way. I think.
Okay. Right. One thing you said actually right near the beginning of the video where you described Forrest as your partner in crime, just because look how long you played together. It was, I mean, basically 10 years. Like, again, a really amazing amount of time. Right. One of the things that I found so amazing about that is what I try to do sometimes when I do analysis is if I ever come up with what feels like, you know, almost like this, like always applies, like a rule almost, I try to make it like as easy to say as possible so you can remember it. So the line I came up with is this, because obviously it's very tricky to know with roster moves. Like if a team's a top team and then they become the third best team, like should they make a roster move to become number one again, or should they stick with it? And maybe so what I came up with is my line goes like this. It's that you never break up a winning lineup until you basically think they won't win anymore. So as a result, I understood actually why you and Forrest just played together for so many, like we said, it was 10 years where you kept winning trophies pretty much. So I think that is, I know in CS there was other great duos, Heat and Morty and stuff, but they were playing together, you know, maybe 5 years. Even Crimson, Olaf, they maybe had like, you know, 2 or 3 years together. Even when you have a long time together, it's rare that you know, almost no one's going to get near 10 years because you have to almost have, I'd imagine, like unbeatable trust in that guy. It means even if he's in a dip in form, even if he doesn't seem what, you stick with it anyway, which is the hardest thing to do because as I said, the usual way in CS you improve the team is you literally improve the team. You just cut a player who's playing bad, he's not motivated, you bring in the guy who you hope is good right now and he's going to make the team instantly good, which is the classic way, you know, the honeymoon period where people win the tournaments immediately, right? To stick together for that many years, fans might take it for granted that, yeah, but we were 2 of the best players. Like, yeah, but people have their ups and downs. I'm sure even relationships have their ups and downs. It is special that you guys could stay together for that long. I mean, I've told other players in history, like a modern example would be when Elysian Twists first started being really good in Team Liquid, I told those guys privately, if you can, look at the other guy. Like, he's amazing, you're amazing, you're so young and you if you can play together your whole career, just do it. Like, do whatever it takes. Now, obviously that didn't happen in that case because in most cases, it doesn't. So what do you think of this accomplishment to just play that many years together and to keep winning? Like, who is Forrest to you? What does he represent that you would stay with this guy instead of, you know, eventually you leave, he leaves, someone does a move. It's just human nature.
I mean, I think I already answered a little bit on it, and that's pretty straightforward answer. It's just like he pushed my boundaries to become even better than I were. And I saw that if I don't play with him, I'm probably gonna lose so many more finals against him than I did before. So
sure,
he was the competitor that I needed to become even better than I were before. That's how I look at it. Like in the same time, like people thought like why we stuck together, at least in the beginning, that we were best friends or anything like that.
Of course, yes, sure.
We never were. That's one of the things, but we had the same mentality, same mindset of how a winning team works, and I think that's one of the things, you know, like that's we stuck out the most is because, at least for the long time, you know, is that we know how to build a successful team. If you want to be in a successful team, you need to be with us, basically. Of course, you know, and then Olaf and Crims and EW and Flusha and all those guys. They're also great duos in that way, you know, but maybe they'll take it over now because Crims and EW is still playing together, for example. But we maybe have the recipe I think you say that word.
Yeah.
Recipe for success. And I think there's not so many people who actually have that. Sadly. But it's true, like you're saying with Alesund Twist, if you ask me, like, so great players, like, really, really good players. But it's similar also, like, you know, Neo and Taz in the same time. I think Taz even said in the beginning, or was it Neo? Maybe no, I think it was Taz. I think he even said that he hated Neo. In the beginning.
They were like rivals or something.
Yeah, and it doesn't make any sense.
Sure.
Like, when you think about it, I mean, for us at least, we know that they're pretty close friends, and they're still playing together. That's amazing, if you ask me. But that's also pretty cool, you know, in a way. They know also their recipe of winning, and that's shown through their whole career as well. So I don't know, like, I think it's just like me and Forrest, we just like we know what we want, we know what to get out the best of the situation / teams that we're playing in. We know what needs to be necessary to be done to have a successful team. I think there's a very few cases that people do have that. I mean, look on Fallen and Fur, for example, as well. Like, not 10 years like me and Forrest had, but that's also a long time in
CSGO for sure. Yeah,
I mean, think about it. Like, in the end of the day, it's like this. Having a career in anything, and especially in gaming, it's a couple of years. Like, if you're gonna be on top of the game and all that kind of stuff, and if you're getting a partner like I had with Forrest, stick with it. Like, take it into your heart and have it to you fall off, if you ask me.
Right. Obviously, we got through a lot in this interview. At the end of the interview, do you have like a final message, or is there anyone you'd like to thank if they watch the interview?
Now I have to really think about it, because this could be one of the few times we're gonna do an interview again ever. So now I need to take the extra time to really think it through. I mean, the honest answer is mostly I'm thankful for having such a great loyal fans to my whole career professionally. Having a lifetime partner like Forrest next to my side through everything, it's just amazing. To the teams I played for years, to the tournament organizer, partners, journalists, all people around that. You know, I'm grateful for anything that happened through my whole CS career. You know, like, I want, if I could, redo it again, because it's been worth the whole ride, if you ask me. And I've been learning so much about different culture and personalities, and get to know how to trigger people in a funny way, and also make them laugh, and also see the worst moment in their life. It feels like, as a competitor, get connected with the people I thought I would never be connected with. Like, I'm so thankful for that, because, like, I'm ending a chapter that could also mean that I'm coming back, but it also could be ending up with me becoming retired completely. And I'm thankful for everything that I've done through it, and I'm thankful for having the opportunity to do it, you know. But I'm just seeing this is another chapter that's reading in my book, and I hope that people wants to still follow that journey into the next phase of my career in general. Because this is another competition I'm starting, and it's a big mountain to climb, personally. But then at the same time, it's worth it, because finally I'm listening to my health, and don't do like I did, because there's so few people who has the mentality I had through my whole career that could do it, you know, and be still fine with it afterwards. There could be other people who wouldn't be fine with it afterwards. So I would say, like, don't do it in a way.
Tack så mycket.
Tack själv.
This video was kindly supported by Lagger15, Pronogo, Andrew, Dean Tanglis, Animosity, Eric Hillerstad, Andreas Crockneys, Hades, Jensen Gore, Zumba, J-Dubs, Tobias Bernasconi, Alexander Rao, and as always, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Want to ask a question in one of my monthly video AMAs? Do you want teasers? See who's going to be on my next interviews and shows? Maybe you want to take part in a discussion with me where we go anywhere. We had a mad one talking about chess the other month. If so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today at the link in the description box below.